Good afternoon, members. You're hereby summoned to attend the monthly meeting of the Governance and Strategic Planning Committee, which will be a hybrid meeting conducted remotely via WebEx and physically in the Council Chamber, Guildhall, Derry, on Tuesday, the 3rd of June, 2025 at 4 p.m. Okay, I'll just take members' attendance and apologies. I'll just hand over to John.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. Alderman Cook.
Online, John.
Thank you. Alderman Hussey.
Aye.
Alderman Wilkinson.
Online, John.
Councillor Sandra Duffy. Councillor Farrell.
Here.
Councillor Harkin. Councillor Hart.
And Sean.
Councillor Jackson.
Sure.
Councillor Leonard.
And Sean.
Councillor McDade. Councillor McGinley.
Sure.
Councillor Mooney. Councillor Tierney.
Here, John.
And Councillor Nealis.
Sure.
Thank you, members.
Okay, just to read out the broadcasting statement, I'd like to remind everyone physically present at this meeting or in attendance remotely that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. This broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with our protocol. Due to your attendance at this meeting, you're consenting to being filmed and to the use and storage of those images for broadcasting or training purposes and for the purpose of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. Members and approved speakers are reminded to only have their mics and cameras on while speaking at the meeting and to use the chat facility to highlight a request to speak. A copy of the Council privacy notice may be found on the Council website, www.derrystrabane.com. I'm now just going to take a declaration of members' interests. No, okay, moving on. We have two deputations today. The first one is to welcome James Redmond and David Sloan forward from the Northwest Transport Plan. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks again for the invite today to come forward and present to you on an update on the Northwest Transport Plan. As the Chair has mentioned, I'm James Redmond. I head up the Transport Plan and Modelling Unit within the Department for Infrastructure, and I'm joined today by David Sloan, the Project Manager for the Northwest Transport Plan. The purpose of today's presentation is to sort of give you an overview in relation to where we are with the Northwest Transport Plan itself, its development, the level of evidence and data that we're sort of collecting to sort of underpin of what's going to come through in the Transport Plan itself, and also give you an update where we are and sort of a programme in relation to where we will be going in terms of the launch for the actual Transport Plan itself. The next slide, please. It's just probably a few clicks.
An arrow, just if you select the arrow just as we're going through.
Oh.
Needs to be in read view.
There's just a bit of animation. And
Does a click of the mouse bring in the? Yeah. If you go, sorry, Mark. Sorry, Mark, if you just go back to the slide deck and go to view at the top there. And then reading lead, reading view, fifth one across from the left. That should hopefully just, and then your arrow should bring in the animation. The down arrow. Okay.
Yeah.
And you just keep selecting
Just
the next view.
I think we're just trying to be too clever for our own good with animation. So I suppose, just to set the context, I suppose the Department for Infrastructure are working through a suite of new transport plans for the region, and of those 8 transport plans, that what we have is in terms of we have the Northwest Transport Plan, we have the Eastern Transport Plan, which covers the Belfast and 5 surrounding areas. And then we have a number of sub-regional transport plans, which covers the Fermanagh, Omagh, Mid Ulster, Newry, Morning Down, and Armagh, Banbridge. They're the local transport plans, and the new way that in terms of we're developing these new transport plans in terms of being integrated with the local development plans, of the local councils. So of the Northwest Transport Plan, we're working in collaboration with the local council themselves in relation to understanding in relation to what the sort of future aspirations are in relation to the level of growth in terms of populations and employment, and also in relation to that focus in relation to that sustainability in relation to how we connect people more so than actually from the old sort of mindset in relation to looking forward in relation to how we move people, how we make areas more accessible to the people of the region. So in terms of the Northwest Transport Plan, that covers obviously the Derry and sort of Strabane area. Then we have the sub-regional, I suppose in terms of the next. So again, the Northwest Transport Plan itself will set out the framework for transport policy and investment decisions up until 2035, and we'll cover the local transport issues. That includes the active travel, the public transport, the local road network and parking. It provides more detail on the Strabane town and Londonderry city areas. It will also consider that local transport issues across the district or where appropriate, and also that cross-border region as well. The element in terms of the future development of the regional strategic transport network, which is the strategic transport in relation to where we look at our sort of main trunk roads, our rail network and our interurban bus routes, that's sort of covered in its own separate transport plan. So, but in relation to its development is very much in alignment with in the terms of the Northwest Transport Plan. So we're also not looking just in terms of the people movement within the Northwest region, but also in terms of looking at across the region and how that can move to and from the Northwest area itself. These matters are being considered separately by the department. So in terms of where we're looking at is in terms of the Northwest Transport also does not consider the community transport or electric vehicle charge, and that's sort of separate under sort of separate policy areas. And again, in terms of we're happy to update you in the progress of those as these become further developed. And the next slide, please. So in relation to what the area we cover is in terms of, so again, when we look at the strategic transport network itself, so what we have in terms of the strategic transport corridor, we have the main 3 corridors, and the northern corridor, which is the A2, the northwest corridor, which is the A6, and then the western corridor and the A5, so the main connecting routes into the northwest region. We also then, in terms of look at it in relation to the rail network, between Coleraine and Derry itself. And then we're also looking at in relation to the interurban routes. So in terms of this strategic transport network is being considered within its own separate plan, the Regional Strategic Transport Plan. Next slide, please. In terms of the Northwest Transport Plan for the Derry City area, in terms of the local transport network, what you see here is in terms of what the plan itself will encompass. So in terms of looking at the movement of people along those key routes. So in terms of you have the network, which is the main A and B roads, strongly influenced by the River Foyle itself. But in relation to what we have on the either side of the river, in terms of we look at it in relation to the active travel, the public transport, and those car movements. I suppose it's important to say that in relation to we're in a very different place from where we were 10, 15 years ago in relation to when plans, the last transport plans were coming forward. I think it's very much in terms of that people-centric, and it's very important in relation to being that people-centric, having a real understanding in relation to who wants to use our network, but also in relation to and we have a real understanding in terms of the needs of the people who are going to use the transport network, and also in terms of who wants to come to and from the Northwest Transport area as well. The next slide as well, in terms of where we are in relation to building that evidence base, is really trying to understand in relation to what currently serves the Northwest region itself. So in terms of what you have in terms of the blue network there itself is the public transport network and the coverage that we have. So that's a mixture of the Ulster bus services and also in terms of the metro services within the region of the Northwest, Derry City area and Strabane. Again, part of this data gathering exercise is its main ambition is in terms of try to understand the gaps, and also in relation to if we understand the baseline. So when I say baseline, we understand in terms of the movements of people currently and also in terms of that usage. But in relation to working with the council themselves in relation to the aspirations in terms of the growth population, no employment, how are we going to move those people? Because in terms of where, and in relation to where the gaps are and what needs to come forward to sort of serve those needs. Next slide. So at the stage we are in the development of the transport plan itself, what underpins a lot of that information and understanding is in terms of we've a lot of data that comes from both the census data itself, so what we have an understanding in relation to where people live, the demographic of those people, in relation to the age profile of those people, but also travel to work information in relation to where they travel currently and where they go to. Again, it's back to that baseline information in terms of we started that baseline, but then we should project forward in relation to where those growth aspirations are, and then making sure that we provide those levels, those connections in terms of public transport, roads, active travel, etc. Next slide, please. Another level of piece of information that we have is in terms of we're in the large data space in terms of sort of TomTom data. So we're real understanding, not just in relation to historically, we would have just gathered information in terms of snapshots in relation to why people are traveling within the year. We now, in relation to have sort of live real-time data that really gives an understanding in relation to how people's movements across the region and in terms of across the border, which particularly for this northwest is of great importance also. So the next slide is in relation to where we are in terms of that evidence base. So in terms of we are at a baseline point in relation to we've gathered a lot of this information to underpin where we want to get to. I think what's important is that we're being very transparent in this information and the information that we've gathered. And we have an internal website in relation to where all this information will be presented and available for anybody who wants to look at it. Again, as we move over time and we get through the development process itself, in terms of the number of supplementary documents that will become available will grow. I'm going to pass to David in relation to sort of give you the next insight in relation to what the actual transport plan is, its vision, its objectives, and then I'll come back to you in relation to looking at the stages.
Next, excuse me, next slide, please. So we had an initial public engagement exercise in August 2024 and it run till November 2024. And that was to get some initial engagement from the public on the views of the transport for the area, and the wider district, and the opportunities and the challenges that includes parking in the Derry, London Derry and Strabane and wider district areas. So it was really to seek the view, to come up with a vision and objectives and to put that out to the public to get their view on that. So the vision upon the review of that initial engagement was to have an inclusive, sustainable and effective transport system designed to support state safety and well-being, connecting people and communities. And that also is to contribute to a modal shift to reduce emissions, respect the natural and the built environment, and to support economic growth for a prosperous and connected Northwest City region. So that initial engagement was through an online survey, but there was some initial engagement also taken in some primary school, secondary school, and in the local library as well. So we got 90 representations back, so from both mainly individuals, but also organisations as well. And if we could go to the next slide, please. So here is what the results of that initial engagement was, that most respondents agreed or strongly agreed with this vision that we have put forward for consultation. So we got comfort that in terms of the Northwest region, that we had a vision that the public was confident that we could go forward with our transport plan. Next slide, please. So as part of the objectives, we come up with 8 objectives. You just want to hit the arrow up. They should just follow there. Okay, so the first one objective was maintain and improve the transport connections to make an effective transport system which supports the economic growth and the vitality across the Derry, Londonderry and Strabane Northwest City region. Objective 2, well, apologies, there's an error in the presentation there, but objective 2 is to reduce transport emissions through the measures that provide and prioritise and promote sustainable travel options and contribute to modal shift and support the climate change targets and improve air quality. Objective 3, improve the accessibility and the attractiveness of public transport services in the Northwest region. Objective 4, provide a safe, accessible and attractive connected active travel network in Derry, Londonderry and Strabane and support the connectivity for everyday users. Objective 5 is to support a prosperous Derry, Londonderry City and Strabane and Northwest region by contributing to providing a high quality public realm that seeks to reduce vehicle dominance and provide a safe, accessible, attractive and inclusive place to live, work, study and visit. Objective 6, ensure the transport is sustainable, inclusive and is resilient to our changing climate. And Objective 7, contribute to improvements in transport safety to improve the health and the well-being of people and to reduce road casualties and improve air quality. Objective 8 is to maximise all opportunities related in the city and the region as part of the strategic growth plans and to promote the invest in sustainable transport. Next slide, please. So,
Sorry, just to come in there quickly. Just can we take another 2 minutes or so? Is that okay? Thank you.
just go to the next slide, please. So the mapped response as part of the initial consultation showed that what people wanted to see was improved active travel. That was the key focus from the engagement. And pedestrianise along the riverfront area, improve and expand the rail network, and mixed modes, as in terms of not one mode, but just the inclusiveness of various modes, whether that's wheeled, pedestrian, cyclists, etc. So they were the key areas that the initial engagement focused on. Next slide, please. So we have the results of the Derry and Londonderry parking survey, and it really contrasts between both Derry, Londonderry and Strabane that the message that we got was that the council car parks were mostly full in the weekday and weekend at 75% occupancy. On street was at 80% occupancy, and private car parks were at 45% occupancy. The orange is, as you can see on the slide there, is the council car parks, and the blue marks the private car parks that were surveyed at that date indicated on the slide there. Next slide, please. Again, as I said, Strabane again tells similar picture in terms of the car parks in the council and the on-street parking that were of high utilisation for over 50% of the car parks in the area. Next slide, please. Again, I'm just the key trends that that come out of that was that, again, as I said, over 50% of demand were mostly in the council car parks and on street. You could see that they were mainly full for most weekdays. And again, when you look at the private car parks like Quayside and the Foyleside, they were sitting at either 30% or 50% respectively in terms of occupancy. So the free car parking in the on street is obviously the priority here, and you can see the issues that we have to the challenge we have here in the city and also in Strabane to try and counteract that and achieve it within our transport plan. Next slide, please. James.
So very quickly, and just in terms of just progress in relation to where we are. So in terms of this is sort of an agreed methodology which we're we're taking across all the transport plans, in terms of these 6 stages. I think the only difference between the Northwest and the Eastern Transport Plan is that what underpins a lot of the information and the interventions and policy that we'll be bringing forward is we've made a huge investment in a detailed transport model for the development. Next slide. And what that transport model allows us to do, so in terms of really to understand in relation to how behaviours will change as we bring forward interventions and new policies. So the way the transport model is underpinned by a lot of data and information, but then in relation to as we change the network itself, we can really understand in relation to that in that future, how that will impact or change behaviours across the city in relation to, as you change one part of the city, what that will result in another part of the city, and what other further interventions that you will need to bring forward to complement that. It's a presentation in itself just to go through the actual the transport model itself, but in relation to the level of investment and data that has gone into that, and this will across all modes, plus also in terms of the parking. So it just really gives us a real good insight and sort of that is strong evidence base to try to understand in relation to how we explain when we bring forward certain interventions or bring in policies that necessarily are not in line with what the network looks like today, but in relation to, we'll provide that evidence base to support those that information. Next slide.
So what this is showing is the Central Riverfront proposals as part of the Northwest City Deals funding. This really how we will link in the transport plan with the local measures in terms of that scheme, in terms of its placemaking, the active travel component of it, and the encouragement of the public transport and the modal shift. And that all links into the objectives and the vision of the transport plan. And this proposal is a key instrument here to help improve that and achieve that. So in terms of the transport model, the Northwest Transport Model, we'll be able to assess this scheme, and we'll be able to see what the conclusions and what the outcomes of that is to feed into to ensure that our objectives are being met. Next slide, please. So the parking strategy for Derry Londonderry, we are in the initial engagement stage of it to go with a submission to go to the Minister shortly, just to get the public engagement started on that. And we are discussing, we've had meetings with the Derry City and Strabane District Council. Funny, we had a meeting this morning just with the committee to discuss the consultation, how that will look, and to feed that in to the Northwest Transport Plan, as parking is a key element of that. So there's areas around McGee campus, the potential for the development in Derry itself, and how that further engagement and the gathering the feedback on parking related issues, and how we are going to look at that when we get the results of that survey back. So it's a collaborative approach and joint engagement with the council, and we're both doing that hand in hand. And so we're keen to get the public's views and stakeholders, should that be the voluntary or the community sectors as well, to input to that process. Next slide, please. So, as I say, the launch of the parking engagement exercise will probably commence in the next few weeks, once we have our that's being undertaken in Citizen Space, which is a government-based website that the public can go on and answer the survey for us to get the data and the views of the public. So that'll take us into stage 2 then, where we can start to look in the assessment of options as well, and develop options for Derry and Strabane, and test those and see how they function, whether it's car parks being removed or on-street parking, and how sort of various measures to achieve our objectives, how that initial testing in terms of the transport model and what the outcomes of that will be. So that will develop in the next stage, and also engage with key stakeholders as well through the process to ensure that that is a collaborative approach and that everyone feels that it is inclusive and everyone has an input to that. Next slide. I think that concludes this. Thank you. Sorry, I'm run a wee bit over there. Thank you.
Gramila Mayagov, and I apologise. I should have given you the time at the start of that. You have the good grace of being the first deputation when I'm the chair, so everyone after that will be shorter. Take note. Okay, so just from my own point of view, and I know this isn't normal, but I'm a full-side councillor, and definitely engagement with the university and around that piece with the parking schemes would be beneficial for yourselves. They have a monthly meeting where they engage with residents, and I know that the residents within that group would be definitely interested in engaging in that, so definitely get to them. I'm just going to open it up to the floor now to see if anybody has any comments or questions. Okay, Councillor Jackson.
I'm a chair, and on behalf of Sinn Féin, I just want to welcome James and David. It's great to have you here, and I suppose if it's clear that if we're going to grow our economy, if we're going to manage growth within our city and district, connectivity is key, and we need people to be able to move around safely and efficiently, and it is encouraging to see modal shift is at the centre of all of this. But if we're going to maximise the opportunities that are in front of us, the collaboration is key. The different departments working together, and having regular communication is key. There are a few things that is concern or a cause of concern for us at this stage. Like at the start of the presentation, we heard around the different measures that were put in place as part of the consultation. There was schools visited, primary schools, secondary schools. There was an online consultation, and local libraries were visited. But despite all of that, there was only, my maths isn't a strong point, but I'm counting 90 responses. So it seemed a very small number in relation to the responses. And that is alarming. But I suppose if there's, it does sound as if there was quite a lot of lengths went to the encourage people to respond, but it just uptick is alarming. In relation to integration with our local development plan, it's a no-brainer. It completely makes sense. But I think we also need any local transport plan needs to acknowledge and hopefully address existing pressures. Chair, you'll be only too aware of the issues around the A2 Buncrana Road, and the massive issues that and the congestion that happens on a regular basis. And if we are going to unlock potential growth at that part of our city, address the delivery of the A2 Buncrana Road dualling scheme it has to be a priority. And it would be, I would imagine it would be an integral part of a local transport plan. But in relation to the local engagement, it did concern me, and maybe I'm picking this up wrong, because I'm working on the assumption that there's regular communication with yourselves and council, and collaboration as we're developing our own plans. And it did seem that the transport modelling but that's the next stage that we're moving on to. And I know like this committee has received presentations around sort of ambitious plans, exciting plans, around the city data projects. And I was working on an assumption that the modeling would have been done a long time ago, as part of the design of those, schemes. So it does include removal of car parks and things like that. So I thought we would have been well past that modeling stage, but I just, maybe it's just a wee bit of clarity in relation to that, would be helpful. But from our perspective, this is a crucial piece of work, and it's really important that everybody continues to work together so we can overcome the challenges, but mostly we can maximize the potential from the huge opportunities that are in front of us, over the next 5-10 years in the city and district, because it's exciting times. There's a lot of investment. There's a need for huge investment in infrastructure, and if we don't have a plan in place, we won't get it right. So this is a crucial piece of work, and we look forward to working with these and wish you all the best, going forward. So thank you, Chair.
Good. Councillor Jackson, I'm just going to take all the questions and comments together, okay? And then you can come in at the end. Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome to the Chair. And thank you, James and David. Like Councillor Jackson, I would have concerned at the low response, and I'd be very interested in seeing the scattergram of, where those responses actually initiated from. And I say that as a rural councillor representing the Derg. And I look at the first slide, and it shows the area of the Northwest Transport Plan. And then I look towards the right to the Eastern Transport Plan, which covers 5 council areas. Now, our transport situation doesn't begin and end at our council borders. I do note what I would call a lip service to the Northwest City region when I see the map of trips to Strabane. Where's the one for trips to Londonderry? And where's the realisation of the actual transport movement within the Northwest? If I go specifically then to the graphic before your actual presentation, which is the straight line one, I think it's figure 15, it shows straight lines, and they're all within the boundaries of the council area. And, as I say, I'm Castleberg based. The B72, the B50 are important routes there. In other words, our connections through to Enniskillen, our connections from that rural area through to Omagh. And what consideration has been given on those particular issues going forward? I suppose those are my main concerns. What I'm looking at, I'm viewing a 90% urban transport plan. And I'm concerned then about the remainder of our area as to its transport plan. I realise, obviously, development on the A5 will change the scenario again. But remember that the bulk of the A5, when it comes along, goes through West Tyrone, which is Omagh council area, and the former Strabane council area. So there is that connectivity and interconnection that I don't see in what I'm looking at here. Maybe it's there at a higher level, I don't know, but it's not there in what I'm looking at compared to what I imagine the Eastern Transport Plan would look like. Thank you, Chair.
Good. And Councillor Farrell.
Thank you, Chair, and good luck on your new role. And welcome, James and David, on behalf of the SDLP. I think this is useful engagement, welcome engagement. It's important that we get this right because it's going to determine investment decisions over the next 10 years. I agree with the questions that have already been posed by the previous speakers, but I've got 3 specific ones. So we're at stage sort of 1 or 2 of a 6-stage process. What are the timescales for this to be implemented? I've got a question with parking is a major issue across the city and district. There's a definite need for residence parking schemes around the McGee area, around the Bogside, Rossville area as well. And I know that part of the city deal proposal will reduce the availability of council-owned car parks. I saw in the pack, and it hasn't really been touched on here, about on-street parking across the city and district. It's free here at the minute, and it's very heavily used. There's something in the pack about the prospect of charging for on-street parking. So if you could go through, what that means. Is there going to be a consultation? Who makes that decision? And the final question is about the long-awaited widening of the Buncrana Road. Development plans were shelved in April 2023 to allow this transport plan to reach a phase that detailed designs can be done. When will that be, basically? So we've been waiting decades for the Buncrana Road to be widened. It seems to be obstacle after obstacle. The latest obstacle is the transport plan. So when will the transport plan be at a stage where detailed designs can be done on the A2? But thank you.
Garmagat and Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair, and best of luck for the coming year in your role. And thank you to James and David for coming in. And the Northwest Transport Plan is very, very important. In terms of the consultation, I'm not surprised that there isn't massive uptake, because I think people are a wee bit consultationed out. A lot of the answers and responses, you could have guessed them based on previous consultations, in terms of people wanting to see rail expansion, people wanting to see our road network fixed, people wanting to see better connectivity with health services and rural connectivity. I mean, these are long-standing issues, and also people want to see better the addressing of regional disparity. So I think the issue here is not with the fact that people are disinterested in the subject. I think people are fed up being asked by government, and then government fails to actually take action. And actually, our public transport network is getting worse in a lot of ways, or things that should be easy to upgrade and fix are taking enormous, are taking far longer than they should. It's no secret that the road network in Derry right now is getting worse. You look at the Strand Road, it's an absolute disgrace. And we've talked to DFI officials about this, so they're well aware, but there isn't any action and funding to actually address the crisis. You look at basic things in terms of the rail. We've had a response from the DFI minister about addressing rail disparity, which is basically about timetables and stuff like that. A long-standing issue that doesn't require a massive upgrade of the network, but would actually facilitate more people being able to use rail, which would lead to all the positive things that are in the report in terms of objectives around, reducing road deaths, reducing pollution, reducing congestion, etc., etc. But that's a very basic thing. That should have been done years ago. It still can't be done. We're still knocking on the door. The same applies to the next part of the upgrade for the Derry to Coleraine line. So there's a lot of basic things that would actually improve rail services. The problem is the failure of Stormont to actually deliver on these things. And I think that that's the great frustration. So I think that the responses, I think, are the ones that I've seen before. And it's very clear that people know what needs to be improved. People want, an expanded public transportation network. They want improved road networks. And there's all sorts of really good reasons for having that. But we also know that people are very frustrated that this isn't being done. And then a lot of the objectives that are set out, I completely support them. But I'm not confident that Stormont will deliver on it. before we have another consultation about what we need to address. So I suppose my questions to yourselves would be, how confident would you be representing the department that the objectives that you've outlined will actually be done in the next decade? Thank you.
And the next speaker is online. It's Alderman Cook.
Thanks, Chair, for letting me in, and congratulations on your new role as well. And on behalf of the DUP, I would like to thank James and David for their presentation. As Councillor Jackson stated, connectivity is key. And from speaking to my rural colleagues, connectivity is a real issue for them, and lack of public transport in general in the rural areas. They'd also mentioned that the A5, would improve things for them. So speaking on behalf of my rural colleagues, more attention needs to be given to our rural areas. It would definitely what am I trying to say? It would the connectivity is key for them. Not only do they struggle with inaccessible bus stops, no shelters, poor road infrastructure, and so on. So it would only be fair that they have fair connectivity. Thank you.
And we have Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Chair, and good luck on your year ahead. Thanks for the presentation. One of the things prominent in the feedback was active travel. And I think this is an essential component, as one of your slides stated, on the promotion of health and well-being. Also, it can alleviate issues around congestion and parking on our town centres and city centres. So greenways are very, very important, I think, in the Derry City and District. And as some of the previous speakers saying, it's important about linking or outlying areas. So it's a brilliant way of getting people out of their cars onto foot and onto cycle to get into their work or school or industrial estates. So it's a welcome addition to the overall strategy. So thank you.
Okay, Garmayogav, that's everybody. And just in case you don't have enough questions, I've one more to add. So the evidence-based, does it capture cross-border movements? And over to yourselves.
No, thank you, Chair, and forgive me if I've missed anything off, but no, in relation to it, hopefully between me and David, we can answer most of those queries, and or if we can't, we'll take it away and we'll come back in relation to we can report formally. But I suppose in terms of just to kick off the first point in relation to the level of engagement, I suppose it's just to reflect on the stage of the development of this plan. It is, and it's not until generally so in terms of these are the initial building blocks in relation to trying to understand the problems and the issues to ensure that in terms of we actually then can actually identify the interventions and policies that we want to bring forward in that new transformation for the city itself. It's from our own evidence and I suppose history in relation to, it's not until we start to present this spatially in relation to what that network looks like, that in terms of coordinate network looks like in relation to the public transport, the active travel routes, the parking, that's probably the time where in relation to we get the most level of engagement and we see the percentages increase, which will hopefully in the next 3 or 4 months we'll have a draft sort of plan to really get the nuts and get under the bonnet in relation to what we're proposing and why we're proposing it in relation to the gaps and I suppose some of the issues that we've identified through that baseline and assessment. But I suppose what we would ask in relation to what is in terms of like if there's new ways that we can engage with different parts of the community and different parts in terms of that we've mentioned about the rural, we're happy to come along and present to those groups also in relation to sort of try and understand their issues. I suppose we are doing a baseline assessment and understanding of what we feel in terms of at this point is probably that desktop, but in terms of some of that data and that data collection. But in terms of if there's groups that we could maybe coordinate with to be able to go and present with them, we're more than welcome to. We're more than happy to do that. And particularly in terms of the rural, in terms of it's how we do that, I suppose we just have to caveat that in relation to there's a resource issue. Sometimes if that could be coordinated through 1 or 2, 3 groups rather than actually just questions from individuals, in terms of that would particularly help us as a department to try and understand that. But in terms of we're certainly open for that. I suppose in relation to the query in relation to the maps, and I suppose I probably didn't caveat that or explain that. No, in relation to the presentation is a very small snapshot of the information that's provided. There's a lot of data and evidence that sort of underpins this, and we could be here until tomorrow. No, in relation to if you wanted to see the level of data and information that underpins that. But in terms of like what I can give you in terms of just because in terms of some of the pictures, some of the maps that you saw that in relation to certain boundaries, it doesn't stop at any boundary. It doesn't stop. No, in terms of we were particularly in relation to your own question, Chair. No, in terms of looking at those connections to Letterkenny. No, in terms of even down as far as Dublin, and and into Donegal itself. No, in terms of we have an understanding in terms of the movements, and we're also sort of very much in discussions with the NTA and the local councils as well in relation to try and understand their issues, because they're looking at it from their perspective as well, and they're in their sort of their own development plans for that as well. So it's important that in relation to we're coordinating, but also in terms of we're collaborating on it. So in terms of that is, but in relation to the rural connectivity and across the region and that comparison with the ETP. The ETP and when I call the ETP in the 5 local council areas, I think I'm not really sure. I can't remember the rationale for why the Belfast wasn't a standalone like the Northwest itself. But in relation to what I can come forward and say to you in relation to is that they're on a par very much, and it's certainly not just because in terms of the area seems large. It doesn't mean that in terms of the level of intervention and coverage in relation to the needs is any less or any more. And particularly back to that the element in relation to the transport model that's underpinning this in terms of there's a huge investment and in relation to in the realms of nearly £400,000 in terms of to have a transport model for your own city, which is not just for the transport plan, it's for going forward in relation to understanding in relation to any sort of schemes, private developers, etc., that want to bring things forward. Those things could be tested within this transport model, and what you get is a holistic understanding in relation to how that will result or have an impact across the city and the region, which is invaluable in terms of, and also in terms of what we put in place is that coming forward, developers and that level of investment will continue for the city centre. So in terms of, just because in terms of we have a transport plan and a model and it says this, over time it will evolve and build and in relation to, so it will grow as the city does. So we have a real good insight and understanding in relation to where we want to get to and what we need to bring forward in relation to move that modal shift, or in terms of meet one of the objectives that in terms of that we want to sort of bring forward. In terms of timescales for implementation, in terms of, I know that it's probably your timescales was probably in relation to when you're actually turning sod on the ground in relation to, and I probably can't answer that question just today, but what I can say is in terms of the transport plan itself, in terms of it doesn't stop development either. In terms of what it does, it gives us that picture across the city in relation to, particularly in relation to we have the riverfront project. You can't build a riverfront project or stand alone. In terms of it's got interdependencies across the city in relation to the Buncrana Road and elsewhere. So in relation to what has the model itself, but also in terms of the plan, it doesn't look at things in isolation, which I think is vitally important as well. So in terms of, as we bring forward these developments, there's other parts of the city have to be upgraded accordingly, and also in terms of they'll require a certain level of provision in terms of their own public transport, active travel, etc. So I think if we were invited back, in terms of when we probably have some spatially in relation to the levels of interventions and the schemes that we want to bring forward, we'll probably be in a better place at that point in time to give you that understanding in relation to timeframes. But I suppose in terms of the plan itself, where we are in relation to the next 3 or 4 months, we're going to start into that model testing and the long listing scenario. But we would hope by come the Christmas time, start of 2026, in terms of we'll have a draft plan in relation to what that looks and feels like across the city to allow you further engagement to come along. And I think that in relation to where there's an opportunity there in relation to where we can help, that can bring people along, and also in relation to, I would imagine that we'll get more levels of engagement because people can actually see what that actually looks like for them on the ground. In relation to the parking, I think No, across the city, when we did our own sort of baseline understanding of the city, we understand the car dominance that there is here, and it's not just the northwest; it's across the region and wider. And I suppose what we want to understand is in terms of we recognise that through the initial sort of engagement exercise where parking issues didn't really come out. No, and granted the sample size wasn't great either in terms of that 90. So I think that's one of the reasons why we've brought forward this next level of engagement in terms of specifically to parking. Because I think it's important that in relation to parking, and a lot of people throw out residence parking and on those sort of these levels of controls. But in terms of there's certain things come with that residence parking or these controls in terms of, and it's really to gather an understanding in relation to from the people who live here and the people who use it and will be parking, what does this mean for them? And in relation to what measures that they will need to put in place, but also in terms of what alternatives are there for them as well. So that again, on the back of that, in terms of we just welcome and encourage as many people to engage in that process to really give us an understanding in relation to what the issues are. Is it residence parking that really needs to come forward, or is it another form of sort of parking control, etc.? So because in terms of there's a number of sort of different measures and demand measures that can be brought forward, but it's not one size fits all. No, essentially. In relation to the Buncrana Road, again, it's probably back to that same question in relation to. We'll come back later and probably to give you a better time frame and understand it. David will probably do that. We recognise the importance of that consultation, and again, it's back to that point in relation to if there's better ways to consult with individuals and groups, we will welcome that, and we will do that. No, but in terms of it can be coordinated through certain groups, no, and we can do that. Those presentations, no, independently. In relation to how confident we are in relation to the delivery of the plan, I think specifically in relation to where the transport plan is being developed, this is new in relation to how we're sort of collaborating and integrating with the local development plan. So the success of the local development plan in relation to the ambitions and in relation to that prosperity in terms of economic prosperity, but also in terms of those growth aspirations and welcoming that inward investment, in terms of populations and employment. Transport networks is a key enabler to all that, and it's important that we do get it right. So I think in relation to, we're confident being able to point to the things that need to be done, whilst previously before we probably would have looked at different things. We'll do a bit over here and a bit over there. In relation to the beauty of the transport plan itself will be that in terms of we're looking at holistically across the area and trying to really understand and get a grasp in relation to what needs to come forward, because at the end of the day we can't build, there's only certain carriageway space out there, and in relation to the car dominance we can't continue where we are going, and it's back to that movement of people, and in relation to if there's better and more effective ways to do that in terms of the bus, the rail, etc. We'd like to bring that forward in the plan. And the last one is in relation to the rail. I acknowledge your issues in relation to your rail, and I suppose in terms of, I understand that there is discussions ongoing in terms of with TransLink, particularly in terms of with McGee College coming on board in relation to how that sort of can be improved. Again, when I don't have that information just on me in the minute in time, but happy to take that back and then come forward to you in relation to that. Is there any?
Just in terms, I know that the A2 Buncrana Road was mentioned a few times there, Councillor Farrell and Harkin and Jackson. The A2 Buncrana Road, the detailed design, albeit the specimen design was complete in 2022, or 2021, and in 2022 with the Northern Ireland Climate Change Act. Obviously, the carbon footprint of any major road scheme will have a detriment to that and trying to achieve that target. So it was a twofold one where the minister decided that the scheme had to be paused to be review in terms of our climate targets, and also again with the transport plan developments and consultation we'd have to have with councils and things. The scheme itself is a two-lane type dual carriageway mainly. The majority of the scheme not up until Ela, where it starts to cross border. So if we're starting to look at our climate change targets and our carbon footprint. We need to factor in our active travel component into that now to try and meet those measures. So that scheme in tandem being reviewed once our transport plan has been complete, because an active travel will feature a main component of that, as will public transport, and what that may look like, whether it's a high frequency bus corridor or whatever. You know, those type of measures will have to be considered in terms of the overall cost of the scheme. Which I think is maybe sitting at around 100 million. So if that scheme can be reviewed with active travel corridors for cycle lanes, active and a high frequency bus corridor, the scheme and the footprint of it may well change, and the cost of that may well change as well, and then make it more viable. But again, the major projects, prioritisation of all the schemes has yet to be finalised, so we don't know when it'll be coming forward. But I appreciate the transport plan needs to feed into that process to make the scheme again in the business case and make it viable, really. So.
Yep, I have another couple. Thank you. I have another couple of comments from the floor, but I'm just going to bring in John here a minute.
Yeah, Chair, it was just to add one point, and Karen may also have some others, but we're engaging with the DFI team throughout, both in terms of your team and the parking strategy team. I think it was a question from Councillor Farrell in relation to council car parks. We have fed into the parking strategy piece of work the potential sequence that council car parks will reduce in provision as the growth aspirations for the city come forward. I think the comment that was made coming from the initial consultation is there isn't particularly a parking problem at the moment, but increasingly as we develop out sites, there is potentially a major parking problem. The other thing that we have fed through is that while typically parking strategies have looked at the city centre as a whole, our view is there is a need to break that down into zones within the city centre, because there are areas that are experiencing or will experience particular distress in parking. The university area, the Lower Strand Road area being one. And if an overarching city centre analysis shows capacity in some of the private sector car parks, some of those private sector car parks are quite remote from the areas that will experience parking distress. So we're feeding that information through into your parking team, as well as comments, and we would have fed quite a few comments in relation to the A2 Buncrana Road scheme, the necessity for a cross-city rapid transport scheme, and also tying back into Councillor Jackson's comments, the investment that the department has made in terms of creating a transport model for the city is particularly welcome, because those interventions can now be modelled, and there has been high-level modelling undertaken in relation to the scheme for the riverfront that has been proposed for the city deal. What has been presented in the OBC, if you like, is a broadly workable scheme. There has to be a substantial amount of detailed design done on that, but it's not the case that no modelling has been done on that. There has been modelling done on that. Would that
Can I add to that if that's okay?
Yeah.
Yes, there was a modelling study undertaken by a consultant DACOM, the initial part of the scheme in terms for the business case. There was a long list of options tested. There's been extensive traffic modelling undertaken as part of the Central Riverfront. I know you're only seeing a few lines maybe on a page and on a presentation, but there has been a lot of work and a lot of modelling and assessment done to get to this point, to make the business case and the economics of it viable. So there was a long list of options tested, and there was then a short list tested, and the option 3B, which I showed in my presentation, was the option that was selected to go forward. So that's how we've got to that point. So there has been considerable testing. I know you may not have seen that, but I can say there has been quite a body of work done to this point.
I'm just going to bring in Karen now.
Thank you, Chair. And John's covered an awful lot of this, members, but I think it's just important to pick up on some of the comments that members have made throughout this afternoon in terms of the importance of collaboration and of ensuring that we're all tied up together. And so as an officer team, we are trying to liaise across all the departments, from our business teams, from our off-street car parking teams, regeneration teams, the City Deal team, to feed in comments, even for the likes of, for example, looking at camper vans in our car parks, all of these types of things, so that we're ensuring that the initial community engagement that is undertaken, which again at this stage, I suppose, bearing in mind what the team have said from DFI, is just to try and start to get some ideas from the public about what they think should happen in the city and what shouldn't, as opposed to actually setting out, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And I think that's very, very important at this stage. But also then, you know, we will also engage with our other partners through, for example, the Public Transport Task Force, Chamber, all of the other key city stakeholders, to ensure that we're feeding as much information as we can to DFI in terms of the development of the Northwest Transport Plan, because again, it is so important. There again are finite budgets, etc., and we really want that all of these are fitting in with our wider strategic objectives around modal shift, active travel, public transport, but also to ensure that the road network is fit for what we need moving forward into the future. So I suppose just to add a few of those comments, and again, we will bring regular updates. Today's just the start, really. I think we had met with DFI on their if you like, their board for the Northwest Transport Plan, and again at that board meeting we said, look, you need to come in and speak to our members at committee, and then we can then feed in regular reports to you on progress, as well as, you know, getting some feedback from you on how we do the engagement and how DFI lead on that.
Okay, go move it, Karen. Okay, I have two more comments on the floor there, and then we're just going to wrap up this. So first of all, we have Councillor Farrell, and then we have Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair, again. And I'd just like to thank James and David for the answers, specifically around the Buncrana Road. But I'd asked a question about the potential for on-street parking being charged. I'm not lobbying for it, I'm not advocating for it, but could that potentially happen? Could that be an outworking of this transport plan? I do think it was referenced somewhere in the pack. So a bit of detail on that would be useful. Thank you.
I suppose the short answer is, in terms, there's probably nothing off the table, no, in relation to, and that's where, and when you look at the objectives that we've set, no, in relation to, they are ambitious, and they're very much focused on that transformation for the city in relation to how we move that people, and again in relation to how can we better use our, you know, our carriageway space for those alternative modes. I think, in terms, we're only at the very early stages in relation to that level of parking, and the parking demand, within the city, and what that looks like in the future as well. I suppose the full package of measures in terms of these demand measures and pricing, no removal of parking spaces, will all be sort of considered as we sort of work through that the transport planning process itself. So I just say that in terms of it's one of the considerations, but in terms of that level, or no, in terms of the and how much, is probably, we're not at that stage in relation to be able to confirm that.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me back in again. My comment stroke question is really to our Chief Executive, to Karen, to my fellow members of the Northwest Regional Cross Border Group who are here, and indeed to Rachel, who's sitting over there. And Karen mentioned there the word collaboration. And given the cross-border, cross-jurisdictional nature of our Northwest City region, would it be useful to have a presentation on the specifics of the joined-up transport system, north-south, within the Northwest Regional Cross-Border Region to our grouping? Would it be useful, number one, do people think? And number two, if we regard it as useful, would the presenters be willing to draft up a presentation to the Northwest Regional Cross-Border Group? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Subject to colleagues in DFI's consideration, I think it would be very useful. I mean, I think there's a slight distinction here, as I understand it, I mean, we're very pleased you're using language like Northwest City Region and looking at the broader city region for the plan. As I understand it, you're capturing the cross-border movements in and out of the city and out of the district and out of Strabane. But potentially the draft plan will not provide solutions for the wider city region on the other side of the border. And I think that's where the gap exists. And that's the work that's underway within the Northwest Development Group, where there is a need layering over the top of this at some point for a Northwest City Region transport plan that builds upon this work, which is a cross-jurisdictional piece that is something that can and should be funded through the Northwest Fund. So I think a presentation into the group would be very useful, but certainly we need to layer over this another piece of work at some point in the future.
Yes, and I suppose in terms of we would, as a department, have no objection to that. I suppose just probably to highlight that we are working alongside, both in terms of the local councils and across the border, but also in terms of the TII and NTA to also in relation to we're actually the ability to share data. Sometimes we have a share, we're sharing a lot of our sort of movement data, both across the border from both sides. No, currently at the minute, no in relation to, so in terms of there'd be no reason or rationale why we couldn't do that in the future. Now, I suppose there's probably just a timing issue in relation to that, but in relation to, but there's no reason why we can't organise that in the future.
Councillor Jackson.
Yeah, and I just want to appreciate the answers in relation to the modelling and the explanation from officers, because I knew I wasn't imagining it whenever we were assured that modelling had taken place before, whilst the high level concept plans were sort of laid out to us. So that explanation and it does just come from my naivety that the modelling that you're talking about is a much more detailed modelling, and I trust officers when they say that that will be beneficial as we move forward toward in terms of the growth of our city and district. I was coming on the engagement piece as well, because we don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are structures in place. The Northwest Development Group is one, the strategic growth partnerships and other. So there's mechanisms there where we can engage with a wide range of groups of people and representatives. And as the Northwest Transport Plan becomes or progresses and there's more meat in the bones, it certainly would be good to engage with all the relevant structures. They encourage engagement on it. So there's existing structures there that could be quite easily tapped on if DFI officials are willing and able to. So if that continued collaboration and engagement with council at the appropriate time when we need to engage with community partners, the strategic growth partnership is an ideal mechanism to do that. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor, just to add to that, really, just in terms of the work that we're undertaking as part of the transport plans and the consultation, albeit it's an initial engagement, we've had a stage 1, stage 4 is where the plan will be reviewed, and again, it'll go out to full consultation to the public and everyone can comment on that. I think something to add in terms of the work that's been undertaken in terms of the Northwest City deals. The Northwest region's in quite a unique position here because of the funding that's been put forward across many elements, whether it's the central riverfront or technological and health and things that have been put forward for the area. But in terms of the transport plan, working in tandem with that and the public consultation we will have through the transport plan. In terms of the riverfront project itself, the planning application and the specimen design, the detailed design of that will have to go through the public consultation process too, and make sure that that stacks up. And that'll have to be presented, and the modelling will be at a level that the public will be able to understand the detail of it, and make that at a level that people can understand. So, between the transport plans and the work that's been done as part of the Central Riverfront, I think there'll be many opportunities for people to scrutinise the detail and what the proposals are, and to have their view. So you're in a quite a unique position that scheme itself is probably one of the largest schemes in terms of the region itself, in terms of the whole of the north, and as well with the transport plan going in tandem with the local development plans too, with the councillor are bringing forward. So all that tying into one another is quite unique. Some of the other sub-regional transport plans don't have that. So I think that's something that should be recognised as well, that there'll be plenty of opportunities to have a say and an input to that process.
Okay, well, many thanks for that and for your time today. Yep, just quickly.
A very, very quick point, and I suppose it's just linked to this. It's not North and West Transport Plan specific, but our minister in 3 weeks' time is going to be launching a transport strategy for draft consultation, which is sort of the high-level document that sits above the transport plan, but it gives you an understanding in terms of the priorities and in relation to the vision, in relation to how we see transport across the region. And we would just welcome any sort of comments or any sort of feedback in that transport strategy, because that, again, that sort of helps shape and sort of form all of these transport plans. So that's just coming forward.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. Okay, on to our next deputation, and now we have Dr. Owen McGuinness from Ulster University Economic Policy Centre to provide an update on the economic outlook for Derry City and Strabane District Council area. So, Owen, 15 to 20 minutes on the presentation. Okay, Kermit.
Thanks very much, Gahirliok, for that, and I'll keep it. I'm not trying to abuse your good grace now this time, so I'll keep it to the 15 minutes as best I can, just allow a bit of time for questions. So I think most people should have got the slides in the pack anyway, so I just intend to run through the slides pretty quickly here, and so the next slide, please, and then basically give you a bit of an overview of what's happening in initially just what's happening across Northern Ireland or across the north, and then talk a little bit more specifically about the council area, what's happening at the moment within the district, city and district, and then what we expect to happen over the 10-year frame that we look at for the outlook. So in terms of the north generally, as was just say quickly, I mean, 2024, we're starting now to get some of the data in on that, year-end data and on that, and it looked like 2024 was a reasonably good year for the economy across the north in terms of particularly employment. Some of the initial looks around sort of GDP or gross value added also look they're in the positive side of things, and 2025 has begun quite well so far. Now, I think there's a lot of downside risks that maybe people can talk about in the discussion, but I suppose to highlight some, we've moved away from inflation, and indeed with interest rates starting to come down, we've moved away from both of those as being the big downside risks now to more larger kind of geopolitical issues around, particularly around tariffs and what's likely to happen there. On the upside, I suppose, for the North generally, and particularly, I suppose, for a council area like your own, really here on the border, the Irish economy continues to power ahead. Did last year, continues to do this year. So the demand that's there is likely to continue to be quite strong for companies who are selling into the southern market. So, like I said, jobs growth has stayed pretty good, and some of the issues around inflation and interest rates have begun to kind of settle down. I'd probably highlight, just before I move on from that, the question of inflation. We see that coming back to around about 2% later on this year. But probably to highlight there that a lot of the price rises that we've seen, perhaps with the exception of fuel, energy prices, which have fluctuated more, we're really expecting to see a lot of those price rises that have come into place in the last 2 or 3 years in the cost of living crisis now to be baked in. We don't really see any deflation across, or any price decreases across the economy. So I suppose that's an important one to highlight, that we're kind of at a baseline now at which inflation will move from there. So just next slide, please. So employee growth, we started to see some of the initial figures for early 2025. We're beginning to see a bit of a pickup there after Q4. The last quarter of 2024 was showing some decrease in the growth there. So as I say, there's a bit of a pickup there in terms of that across for the North as a whole. And as we'll see, that also kind of shows itself in the council area. So just next slide. And the employment outlook remains pretty good for Northern Ireland as a whole. You can see, I suppose, there's the two lines there. The upper scenario we would look at around about coming close to 9,000 jobs per annum for Northern Ireland as a whole, whereas the baseline scenario is about 5,500 per annum, or 55,000 new jobs. Those are all new and additional jobs in the economy over the next 10 years. I could talk a little bit, in the discussion at the end around the types of jobs and types of sectors those may come in, but perhaps then just move on to the next slide from that. So just looking at the outlook for the city council area, and just the next slide. The first thing to say here, really, as I said, is that you can see from the chart on the left-hand side where employment growth has continued through 2024, has maybe kind of plateaued out a little bit towards the end of that. But that's reflected also in the numbers of vacancies that exist within the council area there. The council area here as well, and it's Derry City and Strabane remains quite a strong council area for numbers of vacancies there. You're talking roughly around between 4,000 and 5,000 vacancies reported to DFC, and that wouldn't be all of the vacancies that exist in the council area. So there is plenty of opportunities out there in terms of employment opportunities. What that doesn't measure, and I spoke to one of the councillors on the way in, is it doesn't measure the quality of those in terms of maybe numbers of hours that are available, whether it's worth moving into those jobs, and all of those sorts of things. So I think that's an important point to bear in mind there. But you are looking at a significant number of vacancies that exist at any point in time, really. Those 4,000 to 5,000 would be over a year, over a 12-month period as a total, with some seasonality built into that. But even at that, if you were looking at that, you're maybe talking between 350, 400 jobs per month available within the council area. And I had a quick look at that just when the first presentation was on. Good concentration of those right across, or a good spread of those, I should say, right across all the jobs and benefits offices within the council area. So it's not all concentrated in the city. There are a number there outside the city as well. So there are opportunities out there, I guess. The quality of those opportunities is another issue. Just next slide. The forecast, we expect to see a continuation here, and what I've added here is slightly different to the Northern Ireland forecast. We've tended to do this for councillors who have heard me speak here before, or new councillors. We tend to look at the difference of what we think it would be on the baseline growth for the council area, or so all things being equal, just growth continuing, and then we have a city deal scenario within that, which in the difference really between the two is when you kind of look at around about 5,500 jobs over the 10-year period on the baseline, we're looking at probably another 5,000 to 6,000 jobs on top of that within the city deal within that. Now, that assumes a full implementation of the city deal running out to sort of the 2035 period, but there a good additional growth that will come there from investment within the city. In terms of the jobs, the types of jobs or the sectors of the jobs that fill in, the next slide has some detail on that, just in the table on that. So just next slide, please. So this gives you then what we call the sectoral breakdown, and they're not occupational breakdowns. That is something we are intend to provide later in the year in terms of the skills barometer work to be done for the council area. But at the moment, we can kind of give you what we expect to see in terms of the sectoral breakdown. And the upper scenario here is probably the one to look at if you're looking at city deal. One of the things, two things probably to highlight here is the concentration of jobs in sectors including information, so ICT jobs, and also in the professional services. We're expecting to see a lot more jobs in those sectors over the next 10 years. Some of the old reliables will continue to create jobs in healthcare, in the health sector. We'll continue to see good job creation there. Also manufacturing. And there'll be a continuation of growth within the city in terms of the jobs there. These are kind of net additional jobs, so it's important to bear in mind that whilst we wouldn't rule out that you would see redundancies in some of these sectors over the period, net and over and above that, these are the sort of numbers where they're probably one to point out to or maybe two just to highlight there. One is retail. Under the kind of baseline, we're expecting to see jobs continue to shrink in that sector. Now, it's important to bear in mind that that is still one of the biggest employing sectors within the city and district, and 140 jobs lost in that is a small number of the overall total, which off the top of my head is in around about 19,000 jobs in retail and wholesale throughout the city and district. So it's a small number, but that probably reflects some of the changing around the high street within that. Under the upper scenario, we'd expect to see some growth in that, but nothing like we've seen really in the sort of 2010s in that sector. The other one just to look at quickly would be accommodation, which is probably covers hotels and hospitality, so hotels, food service, that type of thing. And we're expecting to see growth, continued growth there. It's been good growth in that sector over the last decade, and we're expecting to see that continue at a fairly reasonable rate. So again, I can deal with some queries on that afterwards. Just next slide, please. So GVA, and this is probably a key one. Employment growth is going to continue to be strong within the city and district. And I'll kind of explain this in just a moment, where I think we need to kind of move from a situation where we're not just seeing job creation within the area, important though that is, but we're actually seeing the kind of the higher paid jobs, higher profitability in terms of the companies that are there, better productivity, all of those issues. And I think in some ways, Derry City and Strabane is very reminiscent of Northern Ireland as a whole. Good employment growth over the last 10, 15 years, but the GVA growth hasn't been as strong. So I think we want to see that continue. And I suppose that's where some of the investments around City Deal come into their own in terms of creating the sort of jobs that will be there. But also I think in terms of the enabling work that in some of the projects that are, up for OBC and for approval and economic appraisal and so on and so forth, because they'll allow local companies to benefit from those in terms of improving their own productivity. And I think that's going to be a critical challenge really for us as we go forward. So just next slide on these. Regional balance then, this is something that's probably come to the fore, certainly since the previous minister in the Department for the Economy included regional balance as one of the kind of pillars that the department ought to operate on. It's something that we in the Economic Policy Centre have been looking at for a long period. So we've done a bit of work recently, just published that. And I suppose what we've tried to do in that is kind of look at where are we at in terms of regional balance within the North as a whole, and then what does that mean for some of the local council areas there. And I suppose in general what this is trying to show you is where Derry City and Strabane has shown improvements over the last while, but on a lot of the indicators remains more to be done in terms of even hitting the Northern Ireland level, never mind some of the above that. And I go back to the point there that any of the GVA related ones are the ones that you really want to see issues there. Another thing maybe just to highlight there is the question around on the sort of bottom right of the chart around jobs that are below the real living wage. Now that's different. There's a real living wage and a national living wage, but under the real living wage, it's kind of an inflation related minimum wage, and that has increased in terms of the jobs, in terms of the rate of people within the city and district who are earning below the real living wage. Some of that is an inflation related issue, but some of it may be what I mentioned earlier about the quality of employment that we're bringing forward here and some of the issues there. And that in many ways can be reflected then in terms of household, well, not can be, is certainly always reflected in household incomes. And also, probably another point there around the attractiveness of employment to bring people in out of inactivity, or of some of the welfare supports that are there for them. So it's a key point here, really, I think, in terms of the quality of what's coming forward. And I suppose that it would be a challenge, as I say. So maybe just the final slide then, and then, as I say, I'm kind of happy to take points. What I would say, maybe just going down to the last points here, because some of the rest has been covered in the first two bullet points. I think when I think often about where the council area is at, and as the chief executive pointed out to me there before, it came up, I've been coming back and forward to the council maybe for 7 or 8 years to present the economic outlook. It's probably time for a younger person to be doing this in some ways, but nonetheless, I'm always happy to come back and forward to do it. But I think what I've seen over the time that I've been here is, I suppose, at one level is the amount of ambition that's there within the council in terms of improving things, the city deal, and I'd go back earlier than that, the strategic growth plan, which I think in many ways, led the way towards city deal, and the work that the elected members and the council officers have done in that has matched that ambition, and I think one thing I would say is that when I was kind of doing work in the city maybe 20 years ago, I would have come across more fatalism than actually ambition that I would have seen now. So I think there's a big change. There's a mood shift within the council area, and I think there's going to be a number of challenges, even as employment grows, even if we meet some of the targets around city deal, assuming we do. All of the issues that the two previous speakers spoke about, I think, come to the fore then. In many ways, there's an issue there around what might success look like, and what are the challenges for a council area like Derry City and Strabane in a case like success. What does it mean for enabling infrastructure? What does it mean for housing? What does it mean for other amenities there? What are the types of trade-offs that people then we'll have to start thinking about in terms of those issues. There's another trade-off, I think, in this. A lot of economists like to talk about these trade-offs. I think they're challenging issues for people, and that is if, let's say, the argument around higher productivity, and we achieve that, what does that then mean for, inclusive growth, for having jobs across the spread of the spectrum in which that are there for entry for people who maybe school hasn't been as successful for them? What about entrepreneurship routes, all of those sorts of things? How does that all open up for us within, you know, for us within the communities that in which we live. So I think there's a public investment issue here, that's for sure, but there's also other issues there as well about sort of trying to think through if we kind of achieve this level of success, what would that then mean in terms of the imperatives around providing opportunities right across the board. Project I'm involved in at the moment, and we've actually lined up a number of consultees here within the council area, is around kind of pay setting, and that's a kind of a fascinating one to look at in terms of what is the influence of the minimum wage is a very different influence within the North's economy in terms of how wages are set than work we've done in the South in the last couple of years on that. So in terms of that kind of thinking there and that sort of thing around job quality and all of those sorts of issues that come, I think those are the challenges to think about, as much as ensuring that the investment and some of the other policies benefit the city and district. Thank you.
Hey, Garamila, Magana Shannon. First speaker is Councillor Duffy.
Good morning, Chair, and I'd just like to begin by wishing you well for the year ahead and welcoming you to the committee. I want to thank you very much for the presentation, and I have to say it made for really interesting reading. It's generally a very positive report in terms of the city and district, and you know, we have seen over recent years the decisions taken by the executive in terms of regional balance, as you've outlined, have had a direction of travel towards the northwest, which has been broadly positive. We have seen the largest public investment here in the history of the region, with targeting of innovation and skills and job creation being all part of that. We have seen the Department for Economy as part of the overall executive making sure that regional balance was at the heart of everything that they were doing and their plans. We have seen their economic plan put probably the majority of their pot of funding towards the northwest and towards that ability to bolster up what we had seen before. But we have also seen the task force around the university and that skills element of it. We have seen the department also bring forward around connectivity and around the stabilisation of the airport here, and see the importance of that for us as a city and district and the impact that that will have overall. And of course then what I think is probably one of the biggest game changers here for the city and district is the City Deal projects and the impact that they're going to have. The City Deal projects will create thousands of jobs, but we probably need to make sure that they are the right types of jobs, that they are quality jobs. And pay, you did mention pay, and that is always something that we hear as a city and district that we need to be working on, because similar jobs in other places are paid at a different rate. So that is absolutely something that we need to be looking at. I think in recent years as well, we have seen an increase in house prices locally, which also indicates the growth and confidence that we have as an area. You have mentioned ambition, and I think as a city and district we have absolutely huge ambition over the last while. We did have, I think, over a period of time, a fatalist approach to where we were at, but I think that has changed over the course, particularly over the course of this new council, and how we have looked at our inclusive growth plan, how we have taken that forward, and how we have been strategic about what we want to achieve and what we want to see for a city and district. And then obviously bringing in the executive and with Conor Murphy leading the Department for Economy, setting and train a huge programme in terms of regional balance, taken forward now, of course, by Kiva Archibald. I think that we are looking at a lot of the job creation and where those industries are going to be. We have a history here around healthcare, and we have a huge population who work within that sector, but we also have a lot of work now going on in AI and technology and different sectors like that. It's good to see that our employment rates are also going in the right direction. But I do agree, because I know that there are many vacancies that are still out there that haven't been filled, and maybe that is the question that we need to be looking at those jobs. Is it in relation to pay? Is it in relation to the quality of the job? Or is it in relation to sometimes the difficulties that are within that sector, within those jobs? So I'd like to hear a wee bit more about that. I think that coming into City, we need to have a really good, skilled workforce to ensure that we have the right quality of people ready to take up posts. I think that the Northwest Regional College has been doing a lot of work around academies, and I think that they need to be supported in ensuring that we have the right people there. So I just want to thank you for coming on. One final point that I just noted was around the retail, and I have to say it is disappointing to see that retail is, and it is a wider global issue. But I think that one of our overall aims around City Deal is as well to make sure that our city centre is vibrant and, and thriving. So it is disappointing to see that those figures are going in the opposite direction. But I do know that we have a fantastic city centre and a lot of small independent traders here within the city centre, and they're doing great stuff. And I would hope that as a district we would support them. But it is disappointing to see that go in the opposite direction. But overall, a really positive report. And probably just the question: how do we, as a city and district, make sure that we're working with all our partners to make sure that we continue to be a hub of innovation, a leading hub of inclusivity, and keep that momentum of growth going in the right direction? But thank you, Ewan, for the hugely positive report.
Councillor Duffy, I'm just going to do the same thing, okay? So Councillor Farrell next.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome again, Owen. Much like Councillor Duffy, I think this report's encouraging. I know that we've had bad news recently regarding BT redundancies. There's talk of redundancies at Learning Pool, but when you look at the data since this council was formed in 2014, the growth in jobs has been massive. There were 48,000 jobs across this city and district in 2014. That's now grown to 61,000. So that's an extra 13,000 jobs that exist today that didn't exist then. And what I found astonishing was the number of vacancies that exist across this city and district. And I know, Owen, that you have data in there. I've looked at the most recent data. There's 4,684 jobs that are communicated to DFC that are advertised in job centres. And I'm sure there's employers right across this city and district that don't do that. So there's upwards of 5,000 job vacancies across this city and district, which is hard to believe, to be honest. And we're doing what we can as a council with our labour market partnership about identifying sectors where there are vacancies, where we as a council can, with local partners, attempt to address those skill gaps, to upskill people, to run academies, to get people the skills to perform in those sectors of the economy. And that's useful. But there'll be a lot of those jobs that some people wouldn't want. So I think there needs to be a focus on improving jobs across the city and district, about bringing better jobs, higher paying jobs into the economy. And we've got a number of ways to do that. And Sandra has touched on it. We've got the City Deal projects that are going to come online over the next couple of years. We've got the promise of McGee expansion, which is automatically going to bring jobs in terms of lecturers, support staff, etc. But it's going to bring extra students, which are going to create a graduate pool right across this city. We've got the Grade A office space at Ebrington. We've got major employers now based there. We've got a massive planning application for Ebrington as well, which But when that is delivered, it's just more and more good news. And obviously we've got the Fort George site, which is another strategic site in this city. We've got a planning application coming for a major health hub from the Western Trust. But there's room there for a lot more development that can grow our economy. So I'm not being fatalist at all. Things are improving over time. There's a lot more to do, but what I've mentioned in terms of McGee, City Deal, Fort George, it offers so much potential for the city. So we have to grasp that. We need to make sure that all those things are delivered, because it's going to end up in employment. It's going to end up with more money and wealth circulating around this economy, which is going to lead to a better standard of living for everybody. So really useful presentation. Thank you, Owen.
Carmagat and Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Dr. McGuinness, for the presentation. I'm just looking at the sectoral breakdown, and I'm moving below the top three into the construction and manufacturing sector, being in Castleberg, where there's a proliferation, shall we say, in that particular area. It's one that is of keen interest to myself. And it's the issue of ensuring that when the opportunities come along, should there be major infrastructural projects such as the A5, wastewater treatment, upgrades, City Deal that has been mentioned, our housing issues, and indeed retrofitting of our housing stock, and the green economy, e-vehicles, servicing of those, is the assurance that we have the accredited personnel to undertake those sort of jobs, rather than folk coming into the area and taking those jobs. I suppose I'm talking in terms of social clause scenario, whereby we have the personnel, and sometimes they have the skills but not the accreditation. So it's ensuring that accreditation matches the expectations of the prospective employers, be that at a government level or whatever other level going forward. But I'm looking at the figures there, the upper figures, and you're sitting well over 1,000 potential there, and if it's treated properly, I believe it can move further ahead than that. So that's an area that I'm particularly interested in, and would be interested in your comments on that particular sector. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Owen, I'll just bring you back in again now. Thank you.
Thanks for the questions. I'll maybe just try and there's a couple of questions there, I think, around the vacancies, and vacancies that are difficult to fill, the reasons for that, but also what might be done in terms of with the labour market partnership, and indeed other bodies here. I'm thinking of the regional college as well, the Northwest Regional College, to the fore in that. When you talk to companies about vacancies that are difficult to fill, the response you generally get, the response you would have got a couple of years ago was that it was difficult to find. It was difficult to find the people, with the qualifications or the right experience and all of that was needed. That was so if you went back, and I'm talking here around the time of COVID and after that, in my experience in the last couple of years, when I'm out doing presentations or doing consultations, it's moved in the recent past to, it's not a case of not finding the people with the qualifications, it's finding any people. So a lot of cases, people put a vacancy out and there are no responses, or there is one response coming in. So it's actually trying to get anyone to come through the door to fill the vacancies is now an issue, and that seems to me to be a more challenging point really there, because it would strike me that It probably is borne out by the unemployment numbers, say within the city and district, which are certainly they're higher, as a higher unemployment rate than other parts of the north. But at the same time, it's at very low levels compared to where it has been in the past. Councillor Farrell mentioned the numbers of jobs that have been created in the last 10 years, which would bear that out. So it's in around the work that the LMP and others are doing around that pool of people who are it's not a phrase I like, but it's the phrase we tend to use, the economically inactive. But I think even more so focusing in on those within that pool who, if the opportunities were there, would like to work. That's usually around about sort of 10 to 15% of that bigger number. And it's trying to reach those people. And time again, I haven't done work in the council area on this, but I've done it in Newry, Morton and Down and ABC, and I doubt it's very different here to there, given kind of long-standing unemployment rates in the pockets where we spoke to, both urban and rural. It's in and around the fear of what going to work would mean for the benefits. It's either a break in benefits, a fear of either going back to college would mean for that, or people make within their own heads a very rational decision as to gain and loss there, as to what's on offer, as opposed to what is the potential to be lost, in terms of the welfare benefits, maybe housing benefit or universal credit elements of that. So it's kind of tackling some of those issues. I've been of the view for some time there that I kind of think the 16 hours rule needs to be looked at. I also think the tapering of benefits is another issue that needs to be looked at. I did a bit of work with colleagues in the south a few years ago looking at the work and family payment there, and there's a move there to move away from a kind of a break in terms of if you go into work to a kind of tapering out, and indeed maybe a tapering out over time. So it allows people to go into work, see if it's going to work for them, and then not. So I think looking again at what we're doing in a situation of very low unemployment in general, but also with still high levels of economic inactivity. There are other issues around economic inactivity, around that other 85 to 90% around people with healthcare issues that need to be tackled, but those are other structural issues. But I suppose one thing I would say on that, if you look at the situation we've been able to do in terms of transforming female participation in the labour force over the last 20, 25 years, which would have been the vast majority of people who would have been qualified or defined as economically inactive at that stage, would have had caring responsibilities around the home, and how that has changed. I don't think it's beyond the wit of people now to start looking at some of the other issues around health issues and the economically inactive there. But that's kind of a point. So there's on the one hand, there's the quality of the jobs that are on offer. On the other hand, then there's the penalties, I suppose, that people see in terms of losing the benefits, and it's trying to tackle those issues. It's not easy. It's not easy done. Even in the south, they've in a sense not been able to do it to the degree they would like, and have probably been helped by people coming into the country, really, in terms of continue to sort of float up the labour force there. So that's I suppose an issue around the vacancies and touches on the economic inactivity issue. In terms of maybe just one other point, which Councillor or Alderman Hussey mentioned there, and that is the key around construction and manufacturing growth over the next while. And that's, that speaks to, I think that speaks to an issue really there around two things. I think one is around the attractiveness of work in that. It also, I think, speaks to some of the problems we're having with the apprenticeship system too. I mean, we do have we've quite a high dropout rate out of that. Now, in some cases, in the case of construction, it's not so much a dropout rate to not go into construction, but it tends to be, certainly in the area I live in Newry, Morton Down, it's a dropout to sort of continue working, but not at the apprenticeship rates. And, you can jump in the van with the other lads and head to the south. So you're kind of not finishing out your apprenticeship. Now, that causes people all sorts of issues in terms of their qualifications and accreditations and all of those sorts of things. But it's an attractive thing, I suppose, if you're 17, 18, 19, to be earning kind of full whack as opposed to the apprenticeship rate. So there's that is an issue, and trying to some way or another work that. But also I think in terms of some of the apprenticeship levy issue there for manufacturing firms as well. So there's a kind of a challenge there. I think it's probably another point really around the construction industry here within the council area is that the opportunities in that sector tend to be in very small firms. If you move across into Mid-Ulster, you're talking about firms that are maybe employing 50, 60, 70 people with progression, promotion opportunities in terms of kind of further training, all of those sorts of things. And that is an issue here, particularly for the construction sector in the city and district. Having firms of scale not only gives you issues in terms of if there's a big employment contracts, that those tend to go outside the council area with people coming in vans to work on those. So it's the tradition of not having, there are some, obviously, and it's not to say there are none within the council area, and everybody would be able to think of the larger construction companies here, but don't exist at the same number. And I think that's a challenge there, because that challenges the capabilities of what you can actually develop within your workforce to, if you're self on a couple of employees and you're working on a subcontracting basis, which many will be, your chance of actually upskilling, upgrading the type of work you're doing, unless you're a hard grafter, is, and I know that from family background, is difficult to do that. So that is a challenge, I think, in terms of the jobs that them are on offer within that sector. So I'll leave it there, Chair.
Garmina Mayagat, Owen, really interesting. So thank you for your time, and we'll just move on now. Thank you. We're just going to take a wee 5-minute comfort break here, and then we'll move into the meeting, okay? Okay, Fulcher Ash, and we are just going to kick into the meeting now with any chairperson's business, and I only have one chairperson's business today, and that's from Councillor Duffy.
Good morning, Chris. I have actually 2 items under the one, if that's okay with you. My first is just to offer congratulations to some of the local schools who were really successful. Can get that word out. Successful in a recent award ceremony in Belfast, and I have to say it comes as no shock to probably anybody here in this chamber or in the city and district that we would win so many awards at that, because we have great educators who are really passionate about what they do and great support staff within our local schools. So I just wanted to put on record our congratulations to them. So the first is St Bridget's College and St Ethan's Primary School, who both won School of the Year, one for primary and one for secondary level. And it was absolutely a tremendous accolade for both schools, who do absolutely tremendous work and have great teaching staff and support staff within their schools who are really passionate about the young people there. The second then is to St Colum's College, who won Commitment to Excellence in Language Development, St Cecilia's College for Excellence in Sustainability and the Environment, and finally, I think that we all would like to join in and congratulate David Flood, who is an employee he's one of the support staff in St Cecilia's College, and he won Unsung Hero Award. And I think we're all very proud of David and the work that he has done over many years within that school. I was actually talking to him yesterday, and he was saying that on the night, the principal and vice principal of St Joseph's School were both pupils of St Cecilia's when he started as a support staff in there. So, you know, that's the length of time that he has been there and the commitment that he has shown to the school. So I think it's really brilliant that he won that award. So just wanted to put that on record. My second item of chair's business, unfortunately, is a more somber note, and that is just to pay our condolences to the family of Jerry Dock. Jerry, just want on behalf of Sinn Féin to send our condolences to the family, friends and the wider football fraternity. The word legend is often used to describe people. It's often overused. But I think the legacy of Jerry Dock within the city and within grassroots football is clear for us all to see. And the word legend is absolutely deserved in this case. And I think that he will be greatly missed by the wider community as well. And I know in particular in Shantala, he was a regular figure around our community. So I want to pass on our condolences. I think that Foyle Harps will be a much sadder place, but his legacy is definitely there, and the influence that he has had on thousands and thousands of children who have come through the football will be clear to see for generations to come. So if I could request that the Mayor send a letter of condolence to the family. Thank you, Chair.
Sandra, and I'm sure that the Mayor will write that letter of condolence to the family, and I'm bringing in Councillor Tierney.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose first of all to wish you well in your year ahead. And like Councillor Duffy, I would like to pay on behalf of the SDLP our condolences to the family of Jerry Dock. Jerry is someone who I would consider as a personal friend. I've known him a long, long time. And I was very, very sad on Sunday night when I received word from his daughter Carmel that he had unfortunately passed away. As Sandra said, Jerry is without doubt a legend within Shantalo, and I would argue a legend within junior football across the city and district, if not wider. I was delighted that the former mayor hosted a civic reception for Jerry at the beginning of the year to recognise his contribution to local football. 50 years being involved with one local club is a tremendous achievement. And Jerry Dock, as anybody who has anything or seen anything to do with Foyle Harps, was at the centre of everything that they done. And up until recently, he was still attending matches, junior matches, and cheering on young people. I have no doubt that there will be lots of young people. My own son, who plays for Foyle Harps, was quite sad on Monday morning when we told him the news that Jerry had passed away. And I'm sure that similar feelings were going through hundreds, if not thousands, of homes of young people across the city on Monday morning when young people were told of Jerry's passing. It's incredibly sad. I've no doubt that there will be a tremendous show of young people tomorrow at his funeral. I know some of the plans that Foyle Harps have, and it's only fitting for Jerry and his family that he's recognised. And I would wholeheartedly support the Mayor sending a letter of condolence to his family. And I certainly pass on my heartfelt condolences to the wider family. Thank you, Mayor. Or Chair, sorry.
Councillor Tierney and Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in, and I would like to send my condolences as well to the family of Jerry Dock. It was very sad to hear about his passing, and I remember Jerry when I was a child playing football, playing youth football, and it's amazing that he is still there. And it is true that thousands and thousands of youngsters have progressed with their football with Jerry through Foyle Harps, and he is a legend because. You know, soccer these days or football is big money, and that's not what Jerry was interested in. And I think he just really epitomizes kind of like grassroots football. That's about building up young people. That's about supporting young people. It's about the love of the game. That's about love of community. And I think that that's going to be Jerry Dock's legacy. And I think it's I'm glad that there was a civic reception for him last year, or this year. That's so important that was held to acknowledge his work, his lifetime of work. And it's sad that he'd be gone and he'd be missed. But I think that, you know, when I think about Jerry, I have very happy and fond memories. And I think that will be the same for many families over many generations here in the city. Thank you.
Councillor Harkin. Okay, and moving on to agenda item number 8, and that's matters arising from the open minutes of the Governance and Strategic Planning Committee held on Tuesday, the 6th of May, 2025. No? Okay, so on to agenda item number 9, and that's the year-end draft financial outturn 24-25, and that's going to be led by Alfie.
Thank you, Chair. The report, members, is for you to approve our draft financial outturn position for 24-25. We need to submit our accounts by 30th of June for the year end at 31st of March 25. And this is obviously the key component of those accounts. And these accounts will then be subsequently audited by NIAO, and the final audited accounts will come before Audit Committee in September. So members, just separately, the governance statement, which will also form a key component of the accounts, will be submitted to this month's Audit Committee for your approval also in advance of submission. So members, a lot of background information in the report. I'll just focus on the key issues. The detailed report is in Appendix 1. It's summarised in the table in Section 3.1 of the report, and you'll note a draft underspend position of 245k for the year. A small but positive position. The key elements of that, members, a key message that's been continual is our income levels have exceeded budget across all our services, particularly leisure. Secondly, we have savings across a number of council services as a result of staff vacancies, member allowances, overhead expenditure being closely controlled, etc. We've also had substantial additional investment income during the year in line with our new Treasury management policy. And finally, our rates finalisation figure is smallly positive at 248k. So that's really due to domestic housing growth, but it has been offset by a small negative variance in relation to non-domestic rate and income, basically the result of appeals against revaluations and a risk which we need to keep under consideration within our financial contingency reserve. So that's the positives, members. The negatives within environment, we're aware of the staffing costs and service pressures within that area, which have been dealt with as part of the recent rates process. So that shouldn't be a factor within the current
year. We've set aside provision for a number of critical unbudgeted health and safety and maintenance issues within leisure and community services. Community centre repairs, Victoria Bridge, Glebe, Cairnhill, Lux lighting of our leisure facilities, gym equipment replacement, etc. There are a number of smaller unbudgeted costs, members, which we've incurred. So examples, regional animal welfare grant cuts, planning service review costs incurred as a result of the recent storm. And members would also note that we've transferred 70k to reserves in relation to cultural grant aid shortfalls, including 20k towards the T20 cricket event. The final pressure, member, relates to reserves. You'll be aware we approved a revised reserve reduction strategy as part of the rates, so we've had to find that money as part of this year's outturn. Just a couple of other points to note, members don't contribute to a positive or negative position within the report, but you'll be aware the HMRC VAT settlement, we've submitted a further claim now. It hasn't been paid yet, but it's been submitted to HMRC, which brings the claim to over 5 million. That, members, has simply been transferred to our Strategic Leisure Capital Fund in line with our agreed capital strategy. So in that sense, it hasn't given rise to a surplus, but it's obviously a very positive outcome. In terms of our financial contingency reserve at 31st of March, we have a remaining balance within that of 4.694 million, and that's set out in Appendix 2 for your consideration. In terms of the surplus position, members, what's proposed to you within the report is that 45k of the surplus is taken to our district fund and the remaining 200k is transferred to our capital fund. We obviously have massive aspirations which we need to finance, and we're trying to put as much money into that as possible. So, members, that's the report. The recommendations are that you approve the outturn report, including the 245k draft surplus position and associated contributing factors, that 200k of this is transferred to our capital fund, and that the remaining surplus balance of 45 is carried within our district fund. And it's also recommended that you endorse our current financial contingency reserve position as detailed in Appendix 2. Thank you, Chair.
Alfie, our first speaker, and that is Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Alfie. It's a positive report. You would much rather see a report like this than a report showing a deficit. So, and the increase in leisure, the savings that have been met by council were unforeseen. So this is we're in a positive position, but as Alfie has outlined in his presentation, and Chair, you would be aware, council have huge capital ambitions. There was a meeting of the capital working group this morning where we're hoping to progress a huge suite of community projects, and whilst we've got huge ambitions, there's challenges along with that. We know the pressures on construction inflation. We know, and we know that there's huge demands on council in relation to delivery and meeting the demands and the expectations within communities. So we're fully supportive of the recommendation. It makes sense. It's something that it helps. Again, it helps a small bit towards the delivery of our ambitious plans. So on behalf of Sinn Féin, I'm more than happy to propose the recommendation. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Jackson and Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Chair, and again, thank you, Alfie, for the report. I'm not going to dwell on everything that Councillor Jackson has said, but I just want to note, because there was a particular line in the report that I just feel needs to be reset. And the report reflects historic income and expenditure for this council area. And I think that that's really a hugely positive thing to be saying. We do have huge ambition. We have huge ambition around our capital projects. And I do welcome the movement around our community projects in terms of that capital expenditure. But particularly, I again need to welcome all movements towards our strategic projects, and particularly the strategic leisure in terms of Templemore. And I make no apology for being parochial around that. I think that it is a commitment that we have given as a council, and with each report that you bring, Alfie, and I sincerely thank you for it. I feel it moving closer with each of these reports. So it is a hugely positive report, and I just want to thank you for it. And I also want to second the report. Thank you, Chair.
And next speaker is online, and that's Alderman Kerrigan.
Thank you very much, Chair, for allowing me in, and I do wish you well in your term of office. Chair, just a couple of wee points just for clarification, just for my own mind. I do note our party group and are content with the report as it stands, and will be supporting it. But just a couple of wee things to get in my own head here, Alfie. In regards to that last claim that you've put in regards to the VAT and the leisure end of things, approximately, have you a figure? I know you said that it increases it to an excess of 5 million, the total money that's been claimed, but have you an approximate figure of what it is, and have you a ballpark timeline as to when that might come? A follow-up wee one there, another 2 wee questions in that there. Are we content that the issue in regards to E&R and that, I mean, that there from my calculations there, it's when 712,000 stated in there, it works out as over £600,000. That's approximately 1% onto our rates bill, as far as I can see there. And I know there was issues in regards to the Christmas lighting, and I know that's been dealt with by the E&R directorate and that, but it's still significant money. I mean, with that impact there, that has made yes, we have a surplus, but it's made our surplus a right wee bit smaller from, to 245 when it could have been, over 500,000 at least, maybe, So it's, I'm just wondering, is that issue, we're content that issue is now dealt with, or is there any sign of anything? I'm just, the look of it there, the DNR director maybe not ask for enough when it came to the rates process. I know we all want to keep the rates as low as possible. And the third little point then, in regards to, you have another column in there in regards to additional costs. I think it's a figure of, I'm trying to switch between screens here, 329,000, but it's mentioned about a challenge there. There's 106,000 mentioned in regards to gold mine challenge, and then there was a figure of £250,000 that had been set aside in the rates process, but it was 365,000. So I'm just clarifying, you have stated that costs have been awarded to council, but again, it's just the two questions. Approximately how much of that do we feel we might get back, or can we put that into numbers, and a potential of a time scale? Because I know you have stated that you haven't included it because it could well be delayed, but just to get a wee bit of clarity in my own mind on it. And again, we are supportive of the two main strategic leisure projects, as has been stated, but again, we still have many other items that are on the capital working group that are still requiring the support and still requiring the funds. So just to highlight that as well. But thank you very much, Chair, for allowing me in.
Yep, thank you, Alderman Kerrigan. So in terms of the VAT appeal, we've already received over 4.5 million, and that related to a number of years up to 31st of March 24, where once the agreement was green lighted, we were able to submit a claim for a number of years. Just in the last week, we've submitted a claim for a further 486k. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't receive that pretty quickly. But I suppose the key point is that we've transferred those funds straight to our capital fund. We've obviously accrued that debtor and transferred those funds straight to our capital fund because obviously the significant aspirations we need to fund. In terms of E&R, Obviously, we've looked at that issue in detail as part of the rates process. It's obviously a service area which is under significant demand, but I suppose we're going into the year confident that we have a budgeted service in place, but it's something we'll keep an eye on as the year progresses. And finally, in relation to the gold mine appeals you've mentioned, we've been awarded costs. If we had any certainty about how much cost we were going to be awarded, we would have had to accrue a debtor under our accounts. We weren't able to do that because from discussions with Philip, it's going to be a period of negotiation and discussion. So we're not yet at any point where we can forecast that with any reasonable certainty, but we will get money back. Hopefully it'll be agreed as soon as possible, and we'll obviously advise as soon as that happens. I think that answers all the questions, does it?
Sure. Just to add to Alfie's point, and obviously the Director of Environment and Regeneration has had to leave, but just specifically in relation to that issue, the section is under tremendous pressure. I mean, as we seek to improve cleansing, grounds maintenance, parks, open spaces, cemeteries, all of those issues, Alderman Kerrigan, there's a constant pressure to add resources to that service. Obviously, we've done so through the rates estimates process this year. In the last number of years, due to us trying to cut back on costs, we're trying to rebuild on some of those areas as well. So certainly we hope that situation will improve significantly this year, but as growth increases and as pressures increase and as the demands of our communities increase in terms of service provision, I certainly wouldn't rule out further suggested increases in some of those budgets ahead. But certainly, as Alfie has said, this year there'll be a significant rebalancing of what we've seen from last year to this year. And in terms of the community capital aspirations, as has been reflected by a number of members here, that's very significant. There's been very good progress made within the capital working group in a number of meetings, including this morning's. And we hope to bring forward a paper into the next meeting of this committee in July with some recommendations as for members to consider in relation to moving some of those projects forward. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your response. Thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Farrell.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Alfie, for the report. And just to concur with the other speakers, it's a really positive outcome to the last financial year, and thanks to the entire team for prudent financial management. But I'm just going to raise the issue of the rate support grant again. We had correspondence from DFC in February saying that it'll be considered with other pressures in the departmental budget. I note that the paper said that disappointingly, there's no outcome to the review of the rate support grant yet, but do we have any understanding of the status of that? You know, are they still taking information? Is it being considered? Is it awaiting ministerial approval? Have we any idea what's going on with that? Because it is really important for our council. We feel we should be getting more support from Stormont, so we do need certainty and clarity on that, because we've submitted this a long time ago. It's been adopted by every single council across the north, and it's just a black hole. So any news at all on that?
Well, I was going to say nothing official.
So in terms of the review, we haven't heard anything. I have a finance working group on Thursday with Department for Communities, which is the 11 finance officers in the audit office, and I'll raise it again at that just to see where that is. Just literally this afternoon, it usually happens after I write the report, we get a bit of information, but this year's budget has just been confirmed literally this afternoon. So you'll be aware last year's allocation was 3.124 million for the 11 councils. During our rates process, we were, I suppose, thinking that was going to be cut again to 2.75. Thankfully, it hasn't. It's remained at 3.124. It's obviously significantly lower than we would want it to be. But in terms of the review and that, we'll raise it again to see if there's been any progress in that, but certainly I haven't heard anything since, unfortunately.
Okay, Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing too long, just the questions have all been asked and have been well answered, and sincere congratulations to Alfie on the report and to all involved in producing that on behalf of the Ulster Unionist Party.
Okay, Garmagat, and moving on then to agenda item number 10, and that's a corporate plan and improvement plan 25-26, and Ellen is going to take us through that report.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, this report follows on from a report in March which set out our draft improvement objectives, and we put those out to consultation at that stage. The feedback has been generally fairly positive, and we've drawn up the corporate plan and improvement plan for 25-26. So today, for members' consideration, the recommendation is that, subject to your comments, that plan is indeed approved and forwarded and published by the 30th of June. Thank you, members.
Garmagat, Ellen, and any speakers on that one? Councillor Minnick.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome to as Chair to the committee. Just from my own personal perspective only, and wish you well for the year. But thank you to Ellen, and remember the pack coming on the previous report coming on there a couple of months ago. So on behalf of our group, Ellen, I'm quite happy to propose it, and thank you for the work done by Ellen and the officers. Thank you, Chair.
Garmagat and Councillor Leonard.
Garmagat, Ciara Cox, Balmora to Foster, you look on your new post. Listen, there's a massive amount of work that's gone into gathering all these figures. Well done to everybody involved, but there's just one figure that, hopefully I'm reading it wrong, I don't know if I am or not, but on page 163, it's under the section Environment and Building Control. 176 residents consulted with as part of 4 bilingual street name requests processed. Does that mean that there were just 4 bilingual street names approved? Or are we reading that wrong? Thank you.
Through you, Chair, that information's been provided through ENR. Unfortunately, Karen's not here, but that's the information that's been produced in the ENR service plan and has been presented through the ENR committee. So that's taken from that directly. So I would assume your interpretation is correct.
Chair, if needs be, happy that we follow up with an email to members clarifying those figures and just what's behind them, if you're content. Yeah.
Yes, Ron, thank you.
If Ellen, if you're happy to follow up with Karen Phillips on that, please.
Okay, and moving on then to agenda item number 11, and that's review of the safeguarding policy for adults. And that's Ellen taking us through that report as well.
Again, through you, Chair, this is a further report relating to the review of safeguarding arrangements in council. And as you would note that previously in April, we brought forward a safeguarding policy relating to children and young people. This particular report relates to the review of safeguarding for policy for adults. And obviously the review has given us the opportunity to update operational arrangements and streamline processes and indeed reinforce safeguarding procedures, and also the impact in terms of safeguarding that the ending violence against women and girls represents. Again, the recommendation in front of members today is subject to your comments that this new safeguarding policy for adults is approved. Thank you, members.
Garmagat and Councillor McGinley.
Garmagat, Chair, and thank you, Ellen, for the report. I'm content to propose the recommendation in terms of adopting the policy. I participated in some of the safeguarding training that was rolled out with Paul and the team, and it really highlights how important safeguarding for all people is in terms of the council. So I think it's a really important piece to get through, and as I say, I'm content to propose the recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, and can we get a seconder for that proposal? Okay, Councillor Minnick. Okay, and agenda item number 12, Rural Needs Annual Monitoring Report, and that's Ellen again.
Thank you, Chair. And obviously under the Rural Needs Act 2016, we're obliged each year to submit to DERA the Rural Needs Annual Monitoring Report within their own template. So this document then sets out the details for our report for 24-25, again, subject to members' comments. That this report is approved, subject to ratification and submitted to DERA by the 20th of June. Thank you, members.
Okay, Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Alan. Again, not dwelling on the issue. This goes back a long way. I remember the term that was introduced by Breeze Rogers was rural proofing, and this is the new stage of that coming through, and it's very welcome. And I thank all officers who have been involved in bringing the report to us, but not only the report, the work that has actually gone on behind the scenes to ensure that the rural needs issue is taken into consideration as we develop any policies, etc., going forward. So thanks for that, and propose the recommendations.
Gormagat, Councillor Leonard.
Gormagat, Kerrick, and also just to acknowledge the work that has gone into this. It's very important that our rural area across the district gets proper attention. Just a couple of points, page 358 and 359, about the development of the Good Relations Action Plan. Yeah, and it says, you know, what's everybody in urban and rural areas gets an equal chance at the money that's available, or equitable chance rather. Just a wee bit of concern, just is it really equitable? Because in the rural areas, there are very, very few staff to administer these programs, and oftentimes it's volunteers. And I'm sure it's been raised before, but it's just a comment I want to make just about the staffing for these programs in rural areas. And also the last 2 points are review of arrangements for council committee meetings and hybrid working. I know some councillors and some council staff live in rural areas with a very, very poor telephone reception and broadband coverage. Is there anything council can do, or anybody they can contact, and how they can improve that, even for thinking about councillors of the future or staff of the future in the council area? Thank you.
Through you, Chair, I'm really happy to take forward your comments to the Good Relations team. And again, if there's any additional information, I'll feed that back. And just to give members a bit of information, what we do in terms of our policy impact assessment or screening processes, not only do we have an obligation to do the screening for equality, but we build in the rural needs. So a number of these comments is some of the information that's been provided during that process. So I'm happy certainly to take back to the Good Relations team your queries there. In terms of the broadband, I mean, I know this has come up quite a few times in terms of the Business and Culture Committee. But again, as I say, if there's anything that they can bring forward, I'll bring it to you as well. Thank you.
Sorry for coming in there, but I think just building on what Ellen has said, there are a number of initiatives being taken forward by the Business and Culture team, some of which have come to this committee, some of which are still in gestation, aligned to the local economic partnership to improve digital connectivity in some of our rural areas, not just for members and staff, but also wider citizens, and the establishment of hubs as well. So I think we could probably bring an update report with regard to that matter back into B&C, just to appraise members of the various initiatives that are underway there.
Okay, and online we have Alderman Kerrigan.
Thank you very much, Chair, for allowing me. And again, our group are content with the report. And I do thank the officers, in particular in regards to the point raises the work on Newton Stewart. But and it's very, very much appreciated for the work that was done there in Newton Stewart, and at least getting a plan. Yes, there's more work to do, but at least there's been a lot of time spent and good work done in Newton Stewart. But I do concur with comments there that Councillor Leonard has raised there in regards to connectivity and that. And just, I suppose, two little things, which I note in the last two points that are raised in the document, in relation to, you know, our carbon footprint and travel being the biggest end of things. Yeah, you know, and just always a wee personal gripe, I suppose, or an issue, we'll put it that way. You know, it's not all our meetings are online, and I know they're not all within our remit there, but a lot of our working groups are held in person and not at convenient times. Should that be 10 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and they're maybe only lasting half an hour or an hour. And let's be fair, that's a pain. Now, when you're coming from the lower end of the council, you know, you're losing 2 hours travel for a half-hour meeting, and it rightly hits your day. And I'm sort of been told that very, very few of the working groups seem to go on to, and I'm referring to internal working groups that the council sets, that very few of them seem to go on to the online format, as one little thing. And just as a point of clarification, I suppose, as well, and I'm not taking anything away from last night, but we have 2 meetings to effectively sort out our election of committee membership and mayor, and a second one for internal and external working groups, whereby I do believe every other council does it all in one night. So you're bringing members down on 2 occasions to do the job. So as I say, that's just a wee. Speaking to colleagues, I haven't got anyone else confirmed that they do it over 2 nights. But as I say, that's just another element on our carbon footprint for us councillors that have a bit further to travel. But no, other than that, Chair, I'm thankful that there is the report in regards to the rural needs and the rural proofing, as Alderman Hussey has referred to. Thank you very much.
Okay, Garmagat. And yep, ready to move on then. So the next agenda item is, apologies, actually, sorry, was there any questions in that Alderman Kerrigan needed answered?
Sorry, through you, Chair. It was a bit hard to hear Alderman Kerrigan, but my understanding was he'd raised points in terms of the working groups being physical as opposed to in person, and I can certainly feed back to the senior management team on that to highlight that issue. Thank you.
Ellen, apologies, Keith, I didn't mean to move on like that. So
Yeah,
the next
100%,
agenda
no
item
problem.
is number 12 and, 13, and that is the Anti-Poverty Action Plan, and Una is going to take us through that report.
Thank you, Chair. Members, you're familiar with this report now because we've had several iterations in terms of the work that we've done in relation to the Anti-Poverty Action Plan, and in the context in terms of the background. Again, we want to reiterate that we're obviously working in the vacuum of not having access to the Northern Ireland anti-poverty strategy at this stage, and the remit really for ourselves was to try to identify local actions within the parameters of what we could do both as a local authority and with our local partners. Members, the key aspect of this report that we want to draw your attention to is the fact now that in addition to having defined actions, we've got defined lead partners, and hopefully what you'll see in section 3.5 really is the breadth in terms of the partnership working both internally and also externally. The fact that we now have so many organisations working alongside us in terms of this delivery. Owen in his earlier presentation asked what would success look like, and by and large people are telling us, local residents are saying better paid jobs, more affordable housing, improved health outcomes, access for people with disabilities to jobs. So many of these issues that they would like to be tackled in terms of poverty are outside of the remit of council, and for that reason we'll be working very closely with colleagues across government departments in terms of looking to see what additional things can be taken forward. Members, other aspect of this report in terms of implementation is that you will notice that we previously had a task and finish group, an anti-poverty task and finish group, and that was set up to oversee the task of developing an anti-poverty action plan. Now that we have an action plan with an implementation framework, we're proposing that we would change the remit of that group now to be a working group that would meet as and when required. But there's definitely a core ambition in terms of our local partners that we'll come together twice a year to review progress and identify any other actions that maybe we might want to consider. And obviously in the context of any policy decisions or anything that relate to anti-poverty, we'd want to use that as a forum to be able to discuss it and then come back to our local partners. So we're looking for endorsement today of the implementation of the action plan and also to establish an anti-poverty working group to replace the task and finish group. So thank you.
And our speaker is Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in, and thank you, Una, for the presentation, and really thank you for all the work that you've done on this now for quite a few years. There's a lot of work that's went into this document, and it's really about doing everything we can as a council to try and address deprivation and poverty across the district. And I think that if we act on the goals of the document, some good will come of it. And that's important. And it's important that we do everything we can to support families, to support individuals, to support children, and try and lift people out of poverty and give people the best life possible. But the reason why our council initiated this was because there wasn't an overarching anti-poverty strategy coming from the Stormont Executive, and there still isn't. I'm sure that people have seen in the last couple of weeks that the Stormont Executive has agreed a draft strategy after 19 years. And all the reports that I've heard about what the content of that document is that it is an absolute disgrace. It's thrown out all the proposals and recommendations that have been made by the advisory panel and many others. And it will not address the issue of poverty and deprivation across the north. And that's the context we are going to be operating in going forward. And so I think that our council and this draft document, it's important that we do this, and I don't want to limit what's possible, but we are organising and working in a broader context where the levers of government are actually vital to transforming people's lives. And we're being hit with disability payment cuts, and we're being hit by winter fuel cuts from the British government. And then we have a Stormont Executive that it seems to me has failed again. That's all the signals that we're getting. And the report, I know that there was a lot of discussion earlier about how well the district's doing and how great it is and how all the great plans. But I'm sure everybody's seen the report today in the Daily Journal that the new report that says 25.4% of children in our city and district are living in poverty. I don't see that as success. That's actually getting worse. That indicator is getting worse. And without an overarching anti-poverty strategy led by the executive, I think it's going to be very difficult for us as a council to undo the barriers to helping people move forward. But because of the failure of Stormont, that's why we did this, and I think it's good that we've done it, and I think that there's been a lot of hard work and engagement that's went into it. I think we need to try and see it through and implement it and hope that it produces positive results. And so I very much endorse the contents, and I think that having an anti-poverty working group that can assess the work of the council up against the objectives in the document will be very, very important going forward. Thank you.
And Councillor Farrell.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Una, for the report. And I'm going to continue in a similar vein to Councillor Harkin. We as a council agreed to do what we can with the available resources to tackle poverty, disadvantage and deprivation across the city and district. We've consulted widely. We've held numerous workshops. We've come up with a detailed action plan, devised with local people, key local partners, all engaged. And we're going to implement that. And that's really, really positive. But the elephant in the room is, as Councillor Harkin has said, we're waiting 18 years on an overarching anti-poverty strategy from Stormont. It was announced about 2 weeks ago that the executive had agreed it in draft form and that it would be published for public consultation. That hasn't happened yet. I haven't seen what's on it. I had read the suite of recommendations from the expert panel. I don't know if any of that is going to be on there. Nobody knows. But it needs to happen. It's Stormont's job to address poverty. It's Stormont's job to lift people out of poverty. And I'm going to quote, there was a piece of research released a couple of weeks ago. It was a joint project between Queen's and Leeds University. And it looked at deprivation across each council in the north, England, Scotland and Wales. And I think there's like 375 councils, and they looked at 4 specific aspects. They looked at deprivation. Derry and Strabane came #1 in terms of deprivation. They looked at employment deprivation. We came 13th. They looked at education deprivation. We came 1st. And they looked at health deprivation. We came 3rd. So we're in the top 20 on those 4 indices across the North, England, Scotland and Wales. And that's not a place to be, but that's the reality. So we do need to see the anti-poverty strategy from the executive. We probably need to see a specific intervention from the executive to address those issues that exist right across this city and district. So, Una, thank you very much for all the work you've done, along with the entire team, all the people that you've engaged across the city and district. It's a fantastic piece of work. It's a fantastic piece of collaboration and cooperation, and we'll fully support you in that. But Stormont needs to step on and step on quickly. Thank you.
Graham and Councillor Jackson.
Good Chair, and thanks, Dana, for the report. And I largely agree with the previous speakers. It's deeply frustrating that we don't have an overarching poverty strategy, but it is important that Council develops its own and that we come up with initiatives and a plan to do what we can within our own council area and working with others to help people out of poverty, because within the report it does lay it out that 16% of households are in poverty and a further 10 are at risk of poverty. So that's a quarter of this city and district that are either in poverty or at risk of poverty. We have huge aspirations to grow our economy. We have huge aspirations to help create a better, brighter future for people, and we make no apologies for that. There is a better way, and what we do is, but we do need support, and the anti-poverty strategy that is being developed by the executive, the draft anti-poverty strategy. I know the First Minister has come out and said that it could go further. So that tells you all we need to know in relation to that. It's a positive step that there's a draft strategy in place, but it needs to be resourced. And we've seen 14 years of Tory austerity. that has led the poverty within this council area. And we have seen really challenging, currently seeing really challenging budgets within the Stormont departments. So if we're going to be honest with ourselves, unless there's more public money coming into the system, then there's the potential for an anti-poverty strategy to be adequately resourced is very slim. But I really just want to point out the blatantly obvious, and it's really important that we do what we can, either at a 6-county level or at a local council level. They have a plan to get ourselves out of poverty and have better outcomes for people. But it is it's no coincidence that the higher levels of poverty are around the border regions. Partition is hampering development. Our partition has been holding back economies. Partition has failed people in this council area for over 100 years. And the biggest anti-poverty strategy to create a brighter future for people is ending partition and having a proper plan for they grow our economy and have protect the people that live in this part of Ireland from disastrous policy decisions that are taken in London. So again, I would concur with a lot of what's said, but just point out the elephant in the room here, that we can shout and bang a table all day long around levels of poverty, but we can't ignore the disastrous impact that partition is having on has had and is continuing to have on our economy here in the north. Thanks, Chair.
Very good, Councillor Jackson. Do we have a proposer and a seconder for that one? Yep, Councillor Harkin and Councillor Farrell. So moving on then, the next items are open for information. Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to comment very briefly on the plan for neighbourhoods. I just want to welcome the fact that the report has come in. We did have our first meeting maybe 2 weeks ago now, and we have our second meeting now planned for Friday. It was a really positive meeting, and I think that it should be noted that there is huge ambition right across from our strategic or from our growth partnerships, from our built heritage partners and from the business community, and indeed us as a council and our own ambitions within that. There has been a focus at that meeting about community wealth building and then using that fund to lever additional funding and investment into the council area. It's not a huge pot of money, it is 20 million, but I would completely welcome that investment and what that investment could bring and the potential that it has right across our communities and neighbourhoods as it's named. So I look forward to our continued meetings and where we get to in relation to it. I think that it has the legs that it can deliver right across the city on this occasion for us all. And I think that certainly the ambitions are there. The consultations have taken place around quite a number of the projects that have been brought forward at this stage. So we know that they're there. We know that a lot of them are shovel ready, to use that term. So looking forward just to doing some of the work to get them delivered on the ground. Thank you.
Okay, Gormagat, and we have Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair, and quite happy to welcome this, although it doesn't extend to my own area. But I would point out, despite the rant on partition that we heard in the previous item, this is funding coming from the British government. Perhaps Councillor Jackson wishes to refuse to accept that, but we welcome the influx of resources to the council area. Thank you.
Chair, I'll refuse to accept it if the British Treasury stops taking the taxes out of my wages.
Okay, we have Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in. It's just on two items, 16 and 17, and just to say I have no issue supporting a council event to mark the 30th anniversary of the Srebrenica massacre. I think that the hundreds of thousands of Muslims that were killed 30 years ago is an absolute tragedy, and that we should mark that event. And our goal has been for events like that never to happen again. And unfortunately, as we all know, there is a genocide being carried out right now in Palestine, once again targeting an overwhelmingly Muslim population. And there's a tremendous amount of racism involved in that, as there was when it was Bosnia. And I just wanted to let members know that the Irish Congress of Trade Unions, which is the all-Ireland body representing nearly 1 million workers north and south of this island, has organised a moment of reflection tomorrow, June 4th at 1:05, and they're calling for workers all across Ireland to organise a moment of reflection to basically call for an end to the genocide. Tomorrow marks the United Nations call for the end of aggression against children, and we know that tens of thousands of children have been killed in Gaza over the last 2 years and are being starved as we sit in this chamber right now. So I would like to encourage all the council staff to, if they can, participate in this, but also right across the district. I know there'll be workplaces holding short moment of reflections. I'm going to be on the Guildhall steps myself, and would invite and encourage anybody who wants to come along to join me there. I think this is a very important initiative that the ICTU has organised, and I just wanted to add that. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Harkin, is that the 2 agenda items, or is that just one?
The second one is just about it's the Northern Ireland Housing Council update. And look, I'm not surprised that the Communities Minister has come out and said that the social housing build for the coming year has been slashed in half from a pretty paltry 2,000 down to 1,000. And I think it shows once again that the Minister and the Stormont Executive doesn't really have a plan to address the scale of the housing crisis, where we have more than 90,000 people now, families and individuals on the housing waiting list, where we have almost 50,000 household applicants on the housing waiting list. And I just think that, again, that where the evidence is produced about the need to kind of like have a mass social housing build, Stormont is once again incapable of actually responding to it, and instead are actually compounding the crisis. So out of a motion that we had last year, we had a housing crisis task force. We haven't met in a while, and I would like to propose that task force meets to discuss this and discuss how to respond to the Minister. So if I can propose that, Chair, I would like to have us meet as soon as possible.
Okay, I have 2 indicated speakers, just to check and see if it's in the same agenda item. Councillor Duffy, is it on that item?
Yeah, I also have 2 items, but I'll speak on in relation to the Housing Council update first. And just to agree with Councillor Harkin in terms of our huge disappointment with the announcement from the Minister. We do have a housing crisis. We are in the midst of probably the worst figures that we have seen in terms of homelessness, particularly in the city. And we have over 6,000 people who are on the waiting list here in the city. And to hear that the Minister has dropped the target for the coming year to just over 1,000, it gives people a message where they lose hope. And I think that that is something that we need to be really, really careful around, because we have so many people that are in really desperate situations. And if we can't give them hope, I just worry about what will happen. I think that we do have Alderman Kerrigan, who is on the Housing Council representing this council area, but I think that he needs to be reflecting that at the Housing Council meetings. Our huge disappointment. We need to see house building. We need to see homes being built for people right across the north. But in terms of this council area, I know I work in homelessness. I see the impact. I see what's happening on the ground, and I know we all as councillors are dealing on a daily basis with numerous people who are in desperate situations, and the housing crisis is as bad as I have ever seen it. So I think that it's really important that we all try to work together to be very solution focused around the crisis. In terms of the proposal from Councillor Harkin, I don't know if we had a housing task force but if we did have a housing task force, I'm more than happy to reconvene that meeting, because it is important that we do come together to discuss it. So that's that item. But if I can come on again on another item.
Councillor Farrell, is this on this subject? Yep.
Yes, I feel it was going to come up. I was going to do a motion at full council, but here it is what it is. Really, really frustrating. The quarterly figures came out last Thursday, and the waiting list across the city and districts at an all-time high, 6,388 people waiting to be housed. And the announcement from Gordon Lyons yesterday that DFC has budget to build 1,000 houses across the north is going to provide no comfort whatsoever. The plan was that they would build 1,950 homes a year for 3 years. And they're going to achieve about half of that, or we think. And that's 1,000 homes across the north. The question is, what are we getting here in Derry and Strabane? It could be that we get nothing, because of the issues with NI water, that, houses can't be built. So it's so disheartening. It's so frustrating for people, the thousands of people who are waiting to be housed, waiting patiently in really, really difficult situations. And the ambition of the programme for government wasn't good enough as it was. It wasn't going to put a dent in the waiting list. There's nearly 50,000 families in the waiting list. The ambition was just shy of 6,000. That would still leave 44,000 families without permanent residence. So the ambition wasn't there. Now they can't even realise that ambition in the first year. So, it is a mess. So frustrating. I think we do need to reconvene the housing task force or housing working group or whatever we called it. But we do need to understand, in terms of social housing development programme, if 1,000 homes are going to be funded across the north, what does this mean for the city and district? How are we going to benefit, if we benefit at all? But it's really, really disheartening.
Correct. And Alderman Hussey, is it on this issue?
Thank you, Chair. Just on two issues, the Srebrenica issue for starters, just to focus again on the actual content of the report. I note that Council's response to the letter has been that it will light up a couple of buildings. I'm also aware that there had been, and I don't know if it's still active, a very active Remembering Srebrenica group in the city here. And has there been any request from them for council engagement, perhaps in any events that they may be undertaking around that particular period as well? I had the privilege of visiting the Srebrenica site, and it is extremely moving, and it was out of that particular visit by councillors and community personnel that the group actually established itself. So I'm just wondering, has there been any request from the local group as opposed to the national chair? Thank you, Chair. I have a second issue.
Briefly, through you, Chair, it's my understanding the request to light up the buildings comes through that local group, which we exceed each year. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If that's all that they're requesting, fair enough.
Sorry.
With regard to the housing scenario, I totally agree with folk and the reduced target that has been announced. Although I am mindful that the Minister did say, I think it was last year's target, he announced 400 and managed 1,500. He has also given a commitment to strenuously investigate alternative means of raising this total. And I think the best we can do at this stage is to wish him every good wish going forward in achieving that aim, because as others are indicating in the chamber, that even the 2,000 target originally announced is totally inadequate. But, to drop to 1,000 is, as Councillor Duffy has indicated, is extremely debilitating and worrying for those in need. But hopefully the Minister, and I wish him well in all his efforts to try and ensure that the target, or that the actual numbers by the end of the year will be much higher than what's currently sitting at 1,000. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, and we have Alderman Kerrigan online.
Thank you very much, Chair, for allowing me in. And I do believe, just a few points of clarification there. I think we have a housing crisis task force, which, as far as I'm aware, is open to all members. We seem to have a separate task force on temporary accommodation and HMOs, which is an individual working group. But I don't believe, from looking at the pack, that the terms of reference have as yet been set for the housing crisis task force. But I have to apologise, I didn't get to a meeting when it was held. I have no issue, as I have declared an interest in the chat box there in regards to being a member of the Housing Council for this item 17, and I take on board all of the points which have been raised there, and will reiterate the points as Councillor Duffy has raised there, and again touch upon the points there that Councillor Farrell has raised upon also, because it's a cross-departmental situation here and problem here, because, as has been touched on, it's the infrastructure and any water connections as well, and seeking, when there is potential development or approval for development, it's getting the infrastructure in place that it can go on ahead. And as Alderman Hussey has touched upon, yes, the 1,000 figure, which is disappointing that we're in that limit, whereby it was expected to be at least the 2,000 figure, but this time last year it was a figure 400, and it did rise to 1,504 by the end of the year. Yes, still short of the 2,000 figure, but we are hopeful that there can be movement. And again, it will need all of the parties to work together to try to work on the importance of housing and the housing need that's right across this city and district and right across Northern Ireland as a whole. As well as that, Chair, just briefly, I do know that there is movement there from the Minister and from the Housing Executive and trying other initiatives. There's major moves there, and they are hoping that they can get some movement, particularly in regards to the Treasury at Westminster, in regards to that will not affect the block grant. And if that could work into place, there is a chance then that the Housing Executive themselves may well be in a position to build again. But again, that is outside of our decision-making powers. But again, I will reiterate and take forward any of the comments which have been raised there, and raise them at the Housing Council and all of the Housing Executive also. Thank you very much, Chair, for letting me in.
Okay, Alderman Kerrigan and Councillor Duffy, you had another agenda item you wanted to raise?
Chair, it was just in relation to item 18 in correspondence. And I just want to acknowledge the letter from the SDLP in relation to Councillor Tierney. I don't wish to comment. I just wish to acknowledge and note that the response has come through. So thank you.
Okay, Councillor Tierney.
Chair, just to declare an interest.
Alderman Hussey.
It's not on the same subject. It's agenda item 19. And I'm noting the forward schedule. 7th of October. Given the discussion that we've just had, I would suggest that it would be appropriate that we would just have that one presentation at our next meeting, rather than we aim to have two. But for the 7th of October, the housing plan, I think, should be just the one presentation that we have, so that members can have full opportunity on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. We'll bear that in mind. We only have one listed for the 7th of October at the minute, anyway. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, does anybody have any more issues to raise from the open for information papers? No. Okay, so now we'll just go into confidential. Yeah. Thank you. So that's Alderman Hussey and Councillor McGinn.